Hi, Susan.
Hi, sorry, we just finished the high school meeting.
You're live.
All right, good evening. We're going to get started with our school committee meeting on Thursday, March 26th. We are participating by WebEx in light of the coronavirus and respecting social distancing. So all votes that we take this evening will be by roll call. And the first things we have on the agenda are consent agenda. We have our consent agenda items. Thank you, Mary Ellen, for sending us additional information about the bus contract. We'll start with that. Does anyone have any questions on it after receiving the new information? Okay, no questions? All right, so then do we have questions on anything else on the consent agenda? Yeah. All right, so then we'll go ahead and take a roll call. Oh, yes, Suzanne?
Yeah, I was just wondering on the Whipple Foundation, what the closure of the school this spring is going to do. Are they going to go ahead with it? They have the fellows selected. I just wondered what the implications are.
I don't believe they selected the fellows. They were trying to start the recruitment process around now. So I'm sure they don't have fellows selected. I can reach out to them to find out what the plan is. I know the work was scheduled to happen with students over the summer.
Right.
So that may still be able to happen, but I'm not sure about the recruitment process and what that looks like at this point.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for looking into it.
Yep.
All right, so we'll do roll call vote.
Barbara has her hand.
Question, Ms. Gatto?
I don't have a question. I just have I wanted to comment on the Whipple Foundation, because I was thinking about it today, and we devote so much time in life now to science, technology, etc. And I just think that this Whipple Foundation has set up a system that is about people thinking about words. They're thinking about writing. They're thinking about language. And I am so pleased that they are moving back into an area of the humanities, which could in fact spread into science and math and so forth. But I think this is a wonderful program that has been set up, and I am certainly grateful for it.
Thank you, Ms. Gatto. All right, Ms. Gatto, we'll start with you for the consent agenda.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Mr. Perlman, have you joined us?
Yes.
Yes, you've joined us. Is that also yes, your vote?
Yes.
Perfect. Ms. Charlepsky?
Yes.
Ms. Monopoly?
Yes.
Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Dr. Abramowitz?
Yes.
Ms. Wolf-Dickoff? And Ms. Federspiel?
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, let me see. Sorry, I'm having my agenda keeps getting locked out and frozen on my phone. So next we have an update on the school district closing in response to COVID-19 from Interim Superintendent Lummis. You're muted, Ben. Ben, you're muted.
Good to see everyone. As you know, things are never dull in the education world here in the United States of America, or in Massachusetts, or in Brookline. As you all know by now, the governor yesterday decreed that we'd be out until at least May 4th. Just so everyone knows how that was handled, superintendents did not know that was happening until it came out of the governor's mouth. He did not know what date he was heading for. And then, as you know, today, the Commissioner Riley gave some further guidance for all districts and schools. So we'll go into that a little bit. But first, what I wanted to do was share with you just a quick update on a number of matters that we've been working on over the past week or so, and give you and folks listening a small taste of what's happening in our schools. So I'm going to share my
Ben, we can't hear you.
Have I been on mute the whole time?
No, the last
Okay.
2 seconds.
Okay. Well, I was hoping to share a presentation with you, but I can't share my screen, which I didn't know I couldn't do. So either Robin or Betsy, if you could give me the permission to share my screen, a web browser, share my screen, that'd be great. Or I just sent you an email to put that in the COVID-19 folder and the school committee documents folder. Because I don't have permission to do that either. Sorry about this, folks. Sorry for the technological difficulties. Let me just go forward without you folks seeing it for the moment, and then at some point, perhaps you can see as well. So just the first part is the focus of the last week. Focus, as many of you folks know, last week we completed the BEU BSC agreement, which provides basic parameters on how much staff will engage in work, provide learning opportunities, enrichment, and support for our students. That was done, completed last Friday. That that agreement also provided flexibility for all educators on the content and platform that they are using to provide learning opportunities and connecting with students. And it had one of the real values we were all working on together, both the administration, the school committee members, and the BEU, was making sure that all staff, there's a real appreciation and understanding that all of our staff will also face their own personal challenges during the crisis. So in many ways, the sort of way I've been thinking about it is that the agreement really does reflect the autonomy and individual sort of variation we have that exists in our culture in Brookline to start with, in the sense that, you know, every day when we are in classrooms, there is variation across and autonomy for our teachers and our schools and school leaders across classrooms, across grades, across schools, and this agreement supports that culture as it stands today, and doesn't try to recreate it or change it, but really supports it. So what we'll do in a moment, we'll talk a little bit about the phase 1 of remote learning and support and how that's going. And Casey and Nicole will give you some examples of things that are happening across our schools, just to get a flavor of it, really. I don't know if you can see the next slide. So just to continue going on. So I'm just distracted by what you can or can't see here.
We cannot see anything yet.
Yep. Looks like that.
We saw the cover sheet for a minute, but now it's not showing.
Right. So I'll just keep talking. So this week we've also had ongoing support of our families in need. So that includes distributing more than 400 Chromebooks in the past week and more than 500 meals to families in need. If you could go to the next slide, if possible, that'd be great. Our custodians are providing support townwide for cleaning and disinfecting town buildings. So not only our school buildings, but places like fire stations and town hall and other buildings. I will say our tech staff, which really includes Scott Moore and Bob Thomas, in terms of the Chromebook organization, our food service staff, who've been developing and providing and handing out the meals, and our custodians have really gone above and beyond. They've been doing tremendous work really since the closure all the way through, and really I'm proud and appreciative of their dedication and hard work supporting really the entire community. And then the last piece and most important piece of all this is on Monday really launched the phase 1 of remote learning. So what I will do is hand over to Casey and then Nicole to talk more about what we're doing there. And I might be able to share the screen here. And
Look at that.
you see, Casey, you see the,
Yeah,
okay. You see your first slide?
I do.
Okay. So
Put it in
let me know when to change it.
present mode so it's bigger. I think that may help.
Okay, 1 second. Didn't not want to do that one. Hold on, almost there.
Well, while you do that, I will speak a little bit to what my team and I have been focused on since school has been closed. Our overall approach from the directors to folks who've had the ability to reach out to students and families is to come up with the list of our more vulnerable and our most vulnerable students and families. We've been in touch with those families and the students, and by we I mean administrators to service providers, special educators, and we've been prioritizing this across the board from our guidance teams to our students who are in out of district placements. For those of you who may not know, most of the out of district placements where we have our students have closed, including some residential programs. So we all of a sudden have students home for 8+ more hours a day when families really are not accustomed to that. And these students are in programs that are highly structured with a lot more support than what they're currently receiving. So we've also been partnering with the Brookline Police Department to do more frequent wellness checks. We have a list of students who need that type of support. So that's been ongoing. We also have been in touch with families and students of our specialized programs. So families with kids in the RISE program, the ALC who are more medically fragile, and the high school programs, and the TLC too. Ben, can you go to the next slide, please? So breaking up into the more, the separate offices, the separate departments that make up OSS, most of the nurses actually have been volunteering their time in the Brookline with DPH in Brookline just to meet the various needs in town, including being trained as volunteers and picking up shifts at the EOC over on Heath Street, helping out with contact investigations. So once there is a resident who has been tested positive, they then help make calls and sort of do that contact tracing, which has been taking a lot of time. So many thanks to our nurses. Not all of them live close to Brookline, have been volunteering their time under the leadership of our school health coordinator, Tricia Laham. Our guidance team, under the leadership of Maria Litas, has been reaching out to students and families. They've already started sessions with students, especially those at the high school. Bright has also been in touch. They have also been reaching out to families and continuing that care. Our Bright therapists have also been sitting on the BHS clinical team meetings, so that wraparound care has continued. Next slide, please. I'll talk a little bit about special education, which is a little bit more involved. We have been staying updated in terms of what Betsy DeVos's office has been sending out from the federal level, and then of course keeping a close eye on all the guidance that's coming both from Commissioner Riley, but also the Senior Commissioner for Special Education, the State Director of Special Ed, Russell Johnston. We had a call with him. All of the special education administrators across the state had a call with him today. As some of you know, there's been some gray area. Betsy DeVos's office issued an advisory last weekend, essentially saying that we shouldn't let any regulations from the states prevent us from offering services to students with disabilities who are one of our more vulnerable populations. DESE has come out with some guidance to say that if they're not school days, then schools do not need to provide special education services. And hearing from families, CPAC, and talking with the directors, that's just not where we want to be. We need to be offering more because it's such a vulnerable population. We're at risk of students regressing, and in some cases, substantial levels of regression. So We have been planning for that. An update just from a couple of hours ago, what the guidance is now coming from DESE, Special Education Department, is we need to move towards providing special education services. There is some flexibility in terms of what that looks like for each district, because districts have different resources, have different contexts. And so just to give you a little bit, an idea of what we're thinking is more of a phased approach. We still need to assess where our staff are in terms of their availability. Many of them have families of their own. And so we need to keep in mind that they don't have full school days to teach. So first is just really collecting that information. Where are we in terms of capacity? The first phase is really communication, which we already started. Special ed staff have reached out to families to really find out how kids are doing, talking to families and finding out what their support can look like from their end. The next phase is a more customized approach by way of more structured schedules, lesson plans that are more tailored to students' IEP goals, which then leads us to the final stage, which is providing lessons through virtual groups and individual lessons. There'll be some more coming out, communication coming from me to families, but then also to special education staff outlining all of this also. CPAC has also been really helpful. They've put out a survey to all families. And what I've listed here in these 3 sub-bullets is what families have listed, what they need most from us, which is they need more structured activities and lessons. They appreciate all the resources coming in, but at this point, it's information overload for them. And they really want us to say, you need to spend, I'm making this up, but 60 minutes on ELA, and here's the lessons that you should be doing with your students. You should spend a half an hour on developing fine motor skills. They want it down to broken up by time and activity for their students. They want a schedule, and then they really want some social interactions for their students. I think we have a lot of students who are at risk of social isolation at this point. Schools obviously provide a real natural opportunity for kids to connect with other kids, for adults. And so we are hearing that. And what we don't want is for these next phases for us to be tone deaf. So the survey has been really helpful to inform what parents want so that we know the direction that we need to go in.
Nicole?
Do you want questions as you go, or do you want to get through all of this then and then go back?
I think you can hear me. Why don't we pause there and see if you have any questions for Casey, and then we'll move on to Nicole.
Okay, just a couple. First of all, thank you to all of you who are stepping into this arena. Casey, there are so many different things that are underneath your department that there's just a lot there. So thank you. When we talk about, let's start with special education. I mean, when we talked about this a couple weeks ago, we said that there was no way we were going to be able to provide an ESY level of service for students at risk of regression. However, there are many students at risk of regression, and even 3 weeks is a long time. Now that we're talking about nearly 2 full months, I guess I'm wondering how, and as soon as this, let's even pretend it's May 4th and not, something later, we're going to be at ESY pretty quickly. So I guess sort of my question is, for the most vulnerable students, are there things that we can kind of start to put in place now to kind of see this? Hopefully by September we'll be back up and running, but not see this as like a 3-week or a 6-week period of time. But for our students with special needs, it seems to me that planning from, mid-March through the beginning of September feels like a much more reasonable way to think, because there are many students that are going to require, even if they weren't necessarily eligible for ESY, the losses that they're going to have during this period are going to be pretty substantial, especially our out-of-district students, especially if those places are closing. So I guess it would be helpful, we don't do this minute, but it'd be helpful to kind of have more of a strategic perspective on what it's going to take for our different groups of students, different sets of students. Again, every student is different, but there really are different sets of needs that we should be thinking about. And I just want to make sure we're not trying to bootstrap it week after week, but we really are thinking kind of with a longer time frame for students with special needs, especially the most severe ones, but even the ones who are not. So maybe you're already thinking that way, but I think in the next week or two, we really need to understand, wrap our head around what that means in terms of staffing, budget, all kinds of things. There's just a lot there that we need to understand. So that's one set of things. I have another
Yep.
one, but
Okay, can I speak to that first? So we are already thinking about that. So I just want to clarify for folks that ESY is a service and not all students qualify for it. And sometimes students who qualify for it don't qualify for all of the things on their IEPs because you may regress in math, but not ELA. So we would recommend just math. And so I think of ESY as separate from what we need to do now. And what we heard very clearly from the state today was we need to provide more services now to mitigate any need for compensatory services or an ESY program down the road. So the approach that we're taking now is who needs the more and what does more look like? And so that may be that we have 5 or 6 SLP, speech and language pathologists, who have set hours every day, and they may be seeing kids who aren't necessarily on their caseloads because we have kids who have high speech needs. So thinking about it that way, so I'm seeing this as like we're going to be pumping more services between now and June, while also thinking about what should ESY look like, because it may be ESY, but then it may be continued special ed services throughout the summer, if that makes sense.
It does. I just think it might be helpful for us to understand, again, especially if we've got students who are not in residential placement. I mean, those are big impacts on those families. And similarly, you know, what our budget impacts there are, what are we still paying for, what are we not paying for? Again, we don't need to do it all now, but I do think that there's probably some piece of this that we need to just wrap our heads around maybe next week, but just a little bit more holistically than we can in the next 2 minutes.
Yep. And just so folks know, the out-of-district schools have actually already started their own lessons and online learning and providing services to families, which has been great. And we have all intentions to open up district resources for out-of-district students also, because everybody's doing it differently depending on the school's capacity, the out-of-district school's capacity.
Okay, I'm happy to save the rest of my questions for kind of a deeper dive.
Yep.
Casey, I noticed that in our budget, in the budget discussion that we're having a little later with Mary Ellen, that we don't have numbers to include. And so I would just ask, as we numbers that we would include from your department in this area. And so as we go into a deep dive and as we're continuing to talk about budget implications of the COVID-19 and the school closures, to the extent that we can have more information. So if we're needing additional funds and having an understanding of what those additional funds, I think that would be really useful as well. So kind of what Susan was talking about and the what, and then also making sure that we have the numbers so that we have the funding to be able to provide what it is that you're recommending that we provide.
Yep.
Does anybody else have anything? I'm not able to see everyone. I'm only able to see Casey and Susan. So if you could just start talking, that would be helpful.
Oh, this is Suzanne.
Okay, Susan.
Casey, I have a couple of questions. How are IEPs working, both the annuals and if you have new IEPs? Are they being postponed? Are they being held virtually?
Do you mean meetings?
Yeah, annual meetings, yeah.
So right now, we had a meeting with the ETFs about it. We are not holding IEP meetings as of this week. But we may begin to do it next week. What we have to work out, and the state did not have any guidance, but they recognize that we're all asking, is what this does to timelines. Right. Because this also involves, after an IEP meeting, as you probably know, there's documentation that needs to go out to families. Our clerks aren't in the buildings now to do that paperwork.
Yeah.
And so how do we get that piece down? Because we have 10 days to produce that. So we're working on that, but ETFs are ready. They have already been testing out different platforms. The other piece too, though, is when you hold an IEP meeting, you have to have a gen ed, a special educator, you have to have a number of school folks, and it's hard to schedule those folks because they have their own responsibilities right now outside of what their work responsibilities are. So we're working through it. And we're thinking about it. I think the soft rollout might be with annual review meetings first, and then thinking through how we have those meetings where there are students who potentially are going to go out of district.
So,
Having those folks at the table also.
okay, so thank you. So I just had a clarifying question, Casey. On the out-of-district placements, whose responsibility is it to provide the services? Is it the out-of-district
It is.
school? Oh, so like for speech and language, PTOT, it would be their people.
So yes, if they have those people. If they don't, it's different. We may contract with a provider to go out to the school, or some families elect to have their kids come to the schools and be serviced by a PSB staff member.
Okay. And then just one other, if I could, you mentioned communicating to the families. I know you're doing some communication, but when might you send them some kind of memo explaining a lot of this?
So a lot of this is new as of today.
Yeah.
So I have that drafted, but I want to make sure that this doesn't get lost in a bunch of other things that's being sent to them. So we're coordinating with Ben, with Nicole's office, just to make sure that it's all in we're not complicating things.
Okay. So do we think that might happen beginning of next week?
That's what I'm aiming for. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Barbara, did you have a question as well, or
No.
no? Okay. All right. Thank you, Casey.
All right. Just to talk about what has been happening with our general education, in particular our classroom teachers. The first week or so has really been focused on teachers reaching out to students to make sure that folks are okay, their families are okay, and waiting for the go-ahead and a real solid agreement between school committee and the BEU before getting started. And so as soon as that agreement was reached, teachers have been providing guidelines, online resources, options for choice for families, so that families who are working from home are not feeling an immense pressure to finish very specific things, but like, here are some things you can choose from. Here's how much time you should maybe spend on some things. Teachers are sharing online resources with families. There's been a real team approach, despite the idea of autonomy and how important that is in Brookline. Teachers are really coming together to share resources, to share materials, and they are, starting their own repository so that they are able to not duplicate efforts, have some level of consistent team approach by grade level, at least within schools. And so that's really been going well for teachers. They are meeting in grade level teams with their principals independently. They're holding virtual meetings with students, especially those from grades 3 and up, because they have the capacity to do Google Hangouts or Canvas. And in some cases, I think the high school, some folks are using Zoom, which we can talk a little more about. At Heath School in particular, they've done a middle school GSA virtual meeting, and teachers at various grade levels are holding morning meetings so that they touch students. They're not very long, but for those students who are able to engage with them at a certain time, they're able to connect with the students face to face. The students are really enjoying that, and teachers are learning how to use technology and set new parameters around interaction now online, and really thinking about how to use the mute button and how to get students to settle down. They're so excited to see each other. and communicate with one another. And so teachers have been working through the new normal of like, how do I get my class's attention while we're all looking at a computer screen? Next page. In grades 9 through 12, teachers began communicating with parents through email. They're also connecting with students through Zoom, Google Classroom, and Canvas. The level of the connection, some of it's check-in, some of it is, recommending things that students can do as far as academics, recommending reading, engagement with art, nature, etc., so that students are continuing to stay engaged and have some level of routine. And they're also able to share ideas through the United Mind Workers site, which is a site specific for high school teachers. They are posting different lessons and activities that they're doing with students on that site. The other thing, next page, Ben, sorry. Our specialist coaches, the specials teachers, and ETSs have also been really engaged. In particular, our ETSs have supported teachers in getting up and running with technology that they maybe haven't used in the past, troubleshooting, collecting just an idea of what teachers need as far as technology and potentially training for folks. The coaches and specialists have been attending virtual grade level meetings, helping support teachers with creating material and thinking through some of the things that they provide, instructions that they might provide to the parents so that they are able to kind of support their students in getting through some of the materials that have been shared. They've been providing weekly activities for students and families. And the ETSs have also really been working to make sure that the school web pages are more easily able to be navigated. You can easily get to, and this isn't, things aren't done at every school, but they're in process of making those changes so that parents can easily get to their grade level or to their classroom teacher's page, and just recognizing that we want to make sure parents can get to things in 1 or 2 clicks as opposed to things being buried more deeply on pages. And so that work is ongoing. Next. Principals and other administrators at the school level are hosting virtual staff meetings, which, not all folks have been able to attend, but they've been heavily attended. There have been, for some schools, community meetings for families. Principals are working with PTOs to support in getting daily messages out. There's birthday messages going out for students just to keep that social connection going. Some administrators are meeting with students virtually, reading to students online, videotaping themselves reading. They are planning for social emotional support, in particular for those students who they already knew needed more social emotional support during the school day, and really trying to build a plan to support those students while they're away from school, and also creating a system by which teachers and guidance counselors can report back about the needs that have materialized since we've been away from school, and really working to communicate with high-risk students and their families on a consistent basis. Next page. Principals have really been engaged in passing out Chromebooks. We've used 4 school sites to pass out Chromebooks, the same sites where lunch is served. So Brookline High, Baker, Pierce, and CCS. And so principals have doubled up with each other, paired up, and supported the distribution of Chromebooks. Also, being present during food distribution on many days. They're sending weekly staff communications, in some instances, daily staff communication as things change. They are hosting and meeting with grade level and content and course level teams. Department heads, particularly at the high school, have been meeting in teams and one-on-one with teachers as needed and requested. But one of the things that the principals in particular are thinking about is, and just hearing from their own teachers who are home working and trying to manage children at home, and recognizing that there is information overload. We've sent out a lot of information for families, really trying to figure out how to strike a balance of keeping folks informed without overwhelming them. And so really trying to collaborate to think through a plan of, how do we communicate moving forward with families in a way that provides them the information that they need, but doesn't overwhelm them? And then how do we make sure that families can easily access any communication that we have? Next page. And the Office of Teaching and Learning has, from the very beginning, tried to provide some materials for families to access while teachers were getting themselves ready to be up and running. And so we've been meeting virtually to develop those resources. Also planning for the longer term, although we knew we would be closed till the 6th, we also didn't think we would be up and running. And so really trying to think through how we plan for longer term closure, as was announced yesterday. How do we support teachers? How do we think through creating a level of consistency across the district so that if and when folks who are part of the district become sick and are unable to work, and we don't have an opportunity to have substitute teachers, what does that look like? How do we make sure that families aren't feeling confused in, like, I don't have a teacher now, or I don't have the access that I once had? What happens to that, and how do we make things as seamless as possible for transition? We've also been involved in providing technology for families, passing out Chromebooks, planning for the technology needs of staff, in particular, what training needs to happen. How do we provide training modules? What is the timing of those training modules? And what are the needs specific, so that we are providing just in time support for staff that doesn't require people sit through things that they don't necessarily need. We've been consistently updating the website and making sure that we are being very clear and streamlined in the communication that is put up on the website for both teachers on a teacher side as well as a public-facing side. And then providing resources for families and students. We've also engaged in a lot of connecting with other districts to find out what they're doing, to learn from them, as well as share what we're working on. And that's pretty much it. I think that's my last slide, yes?
Any questions?
I'm on mute. I want to just show one more thing before we get into questions. Give me one moment here. Go. Nicole talked about, you should see our website coming up here in a moment. Come on, you can do it. People see the district website?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to go through a few things quickly. So we've reorganized the website so you can see folks can get immediate information in very clear buttons here on the left. You don't have to search for things, and they can get all the updates we're talking about. And then I want to show one of these, which is our learning resources page. This is for families. So this is what the district and our coordinators have been doing, and what our first really sort of phase 0 was. But as you can see, this sort of covers everything. And then schools are also, and teachers are doing their own work, obviously, but this is sort of a one-stop shop place for folks to go, families and others, for learning resources, for library resources, food resources, that sort of thing. So that's the public facing. And then this is also public facing. This is the United Mine Workers site that the high schools put together with all their department heads and coordinators. And you can see some of them are by subject area and some of them by specific course. So social studies here is the 9th grade world history course. And if I scroll down further, you see the guidance department has resources. So special education has academic skills support, and then English learners has a piece there as well. That's where students go as their sort of jumping off point to their learning and their remote learning at the high school. And then we have significant resources for staff. So this is our PSB portal. You can see that we have staff updates on school closures. We have a link to the learning resources for families, which I just showed you. We also have 2 other areas, extended learning site support for staff. So that is, this is for staff. It's where we have all the information they need about everything from urgent announcements to self-care, to mental health resources, staying informed. So this is all for staff again, how to do Google Hangouts and where to get training for that. And then the last piece for staff is this red site, extended learning support for staff. So everything from, as if you can see up at the top here, Google Classroom and Canvas support, how to do screen recordings, how to use Google Meet, and then tips for moving your classroom support online. So those are the stuff we put up in literally the last probably really, some of it was up about a week ago or more. Most of it's up in the last few days, but just trying to share with you the extensive support we have, or online resources we have, both for families, students, and also staff. So let me just go back now to the last slide of this. One second. Switch browsers here. And what I want to talk about here is, does people see a slide that says focus of the upcoming week? Yes, no?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
So as folks know, as you know, that, as I said, the governor announced that we'll have no school until at least through May 4th. Today, what I forwarded you were the Commissioner of Education's guidance for across the state. He released some guiding principles on supporting student learning and remote learning, and also gave us some specific guidance on developing and implementing remote learning. So we are met today, senior leadership, coordinators, directors will start working, continue their planning tomorrow for what we've been calling phase 2, which we'll be ready to launch come April 6th, which is the sort of guidelines the commissioner gave all districts. We will have to have clearer direction on introducing new learning specifically. He also gave some time guidelines in terms of providing approximately half the length of a regular school day, both for teacher-directed learning and also student-directed learning, and also has pushing us to vary that. So across not only academics, but also areas of wellness, arts, physical activity, and obviously what we've been doing on social emotional support. So he's been pretty clear and talking with other districts that, this distinction between remote learning, which happens at home, as opposed to online or virtual learning, which is, a full day of teacher-directed, online, screen time, which at this point, the superintendents that I've been both emailing with and speaking to, folks are not, there are very few, if any, folks who are providing that level of if you think of a college lecture type approach, which wouldn't be all that great for kindergarten, most elementary school teachers anyway. But but the point here is that we will continue this planning for the next phase. It'll take a little bit of time to get some real clear guidance for our staff. I had not spoken to BU leadership yet in terms of if this will warrant any further work with them or not. But we sort of need some time to spell this out to see that's necessary, I think. I'll pause there to see if there are any questions from folks.
There are questions in the chat box. Ben, can you see that, or are you able to?
I will in a moment. Just one second. Now I can.
I can ask mine in the meantime. I was
Great.
asking if you could define remote learning versus online learning versus virtual learning. I think I know some of it, but I'd like to understand how we're defining it.
It's remote learning from, I think, the way we're operating within the superintendent world at this point is learning that is, directed from afar, but happens, at home, basically. That can be, a lot of what we're doing right now: guidance, support, materials, assignments, things that are, how do I say this? It's not a, full half an hour, 45-minute, hour, or 2-hour classroom. It's happening in real time online. It is more of providing resources, providing guidance, direction, answering questions, perhaps doing some work with students online, but then they're often doing the actual work, perhaps offline. I'm not sure if that's a fair distinction, but I sort of, let me pause there.
So in online versus virtual learning?
Virtual learning, I think, would be if you imagined a teacher up in front of a video leading a whole classroom through activities, minute by minute, half an hour by half an hour, that sort of stuff.
Okay.
As opposed to providing resources, providing lessons, providing work, and doing it on a sort of much more asynchronous way, perhaps I should say that.
And is there a distinction in that of the whole class sitting for a whole day in front of it versus having small groups that are participating in a Zoom thing or, smaller lessons? Would that still be the online learning? Remote? I'm actually not, now I'm getting the terms mixed up, but
that's my problem too. They seem to meld into one another sometimes.
It might be, okay. So online learning is usually something that happens independently, right? So in general, you open up your computer and you can go through something on your own. The virtual learning is more like a teacher, like perhaps something like this, where a teacher is sitting and instructing students who are looking at them through a computer, or they're providing videos of themselves teaching a lesson and then posting them so that students use that lesson as guidance to get through some work. Just
I'm going to share.
Independence is a little different.
I'm going to share in a moment after I stop talking. I'm going to share what the commissioner shared out. Okay, and he first says remote learning can encompass a wide variety of learning opportunities. While technology can be a supportive tool, districts and schools should also consider ways that student learning can continue offline. This can include exploring the natural world, activities to support students' local communities, engaging hands-on projects, artistic creations. Examples of remote learning tools include large group video or audio conference calls, one-to-one video calls, email, work packets, projects, reading lists, online learning platforms, and other resources to effectively engage with students. So that's sort of that range, as I think, is what we're operating on. I'll just leave it at that.
Are we also, I'm sure that maybe this is an obvious question, but are we thinking about how much of these different sorts of formats require parental intervention? And so this something that we have experienced firsthand this last week is in receiving some of these resources and things in the format that they're being provided now. They're useful depending on what age the student is at. They're very useful if the parents are able and available to sit next to the student, to guide them through that, to read it to them, to engage with them, to sort of teach them. And so I think that that's a very real struggle for a lot of families. I've heard a lot about, the teachers having this balance where they're trying to balance having children at home and other responsibilities and also their teaching responsibilities. And I think that that is also a struggle that is being felt very real, in a very real way by a lot of families right now. And so I'm interested in some of the conversations that are taking place and how we're thinking about this, of how we're going to enable our students to continue to learn in a way that does not require our parents to become the teachers and our parents to sit next to them for the entire time, for a majority of the time that they're doing the work. Because I think that that's where real disparities are going to be found between students and how they're able to access the information.
Great point. Some of the work that the coordinators are doing is just that. Like, how is it that we can put out work or materials that parents can engage in or don't have to? So could say, have your child has more like instructions, do this, do this, do this. And then the child, depending on the age level, would be able to kind of go on their own and do some things, because that's a real concern. And that's some feedback that we're hearing across all the districts, is that especially now that work is coming out, it is requiring, especially for parents who are at home, it's requiring just what you were talking about. So there is a lot of thought going into that, and it's not an easy question to answer. It's not an easy thing to approach. And so we are really trying to think through whatever materials go out. And hopefully we can start to coordinate this a lot more, that there's some thought in, like, how can we direct parents to, like, what do parents need to be able to do to engage in this, and how much choice do folks have in engaging in some activities and not in others.
And so what is the format, as we're having those conversations, at which different levels are those conversations taking place, and how are we approaching them in a way to figure out what the right solutions are to them?
So we're still really trying to think this through. I think the autonomy piece is the challenge, because we can provide some guidelines and guidance, but teachers can do and are doing amazing things on their own. And I don't think we even know, because we're inside of the profession, we don't even really know how much it takes to do the materials and the lessons that are being thought through. And so that's the flip side of that. And how do we think through a protocol? And hopefully, and I talked to some of my colleagues in other districts, like, what's the protocol that you want to what lens do you want to look at materials through to recognize how much involvement is required from parents or not? And so that's something we're still working on, and we don't have an answer on.
Susan, I don't know how chat box works. I can see the chat box, but is that something that's public, or should we go through?
I've sent through 8 questions, because I don't want to. It would be helpful to get some of those at least addressed or figured out when we will get them addressed.
Mm-hmm.
So I can read them out if you want, but I have kids in the background, and that's sort of annoying, which is why I put them in the chat box. But you all tell me how you want to do it.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if in a chat box, does that, with us being video, with this streaming,
let me just
chat box is public, or this is just internally we see it?
No, I want those answered. This is not an internal question.
Yeah, Julie, it would be great if you could read the questions out loud so that they could be read into the record, and we could just deal with them one at a time.
Will do. So the first question is, how many meals are we providing weekly to how many families?
So we provided 500 meals since last Friday. I don't know off the top of my head how many families that is, but we can get that back to you. Casey, can you keep track of things we need to follow up on, please? Yep, so that's one question.
How many Chromebooks have we distributed to students? And how many more are needed?
Just over 400. And what's the second part of that question?
How many more Chromebooks do we need?
We are at the end of what we need to distribute. There were some folks who weren't able to get them yesterday, and we're following with those individuals at this point.
Okay. And then what additional technology do we need for families and staff? And this is, the question comes because the information that we received about our emergency budget, it does not appear to have additional funds requested for additional technology.
Yeah, we don't need at this point there have been no requests at this point other than a few phones for nurses on additional technology for staff. For families, at this point, very, very few, meaning less than 10 families said they didn't have good enough wireless access.
Oh, good.
Okay, and we're continuing to work with a small group of families to understand if they have greater needs technology-wise. That's work is ongoing, so we don't have an answer, a definitive answer on that yet.
And then what about to the extent that we might need technology platforms or programs or training to either teach to teach teachers how to do this new world of teaching, or platforms to provide different access to learning. So if a child is at home and they want to be able to show a teacher a document, is that additional software that's needed? Are there additional softwares that could be purchased or provided that would help with these interactions?
Much of the online resource that we would typically or would think of using are being offered free at this point. We do have lists of those that are available. I believe those lists are shared on the websites I showed you earlier, although I'm not positive because I haven't looked at those recently. We are providing training on our established platforms. So, Google Meet, Google Classroom, Canvas. We are not at this point expecting nor requiring anybody to, take on new platforms. The ones we have are more than sufficient. And then in terms of, the newest one obviously is WebEx or Zoom. We are trying to encourage folks to stick with Google Meet because the vast majority of our students already have accounts there and can easily log in. And it has the privacy protections and that we require. There is some debate about Zoom at this point, whether it does or doesn't, and which type of accounts do have the proper protections, which don't. So we're investigating that. That's a challenge all of our districts are having across the Commonwealth and beyond at this point, is understanding which of these platforms have the appropriate privacy and student privacy and data requirements that we typically expect. So
the other thing is through Google Classroom and Canvas, teachers can put out assignments and students can turn things in that way as well. If whatever it is you're doing is online or PDF.
At this point, as you know, in the agreement that the school committee agreed to with the BU, there's no requirement that that teachers use a specific platform, whether that's Canvas or email or Google Classroom or or Aspen or anything else, or even if they use one at all. But we are providing support in those areas where people need it.
Are there additional, there are people who teach online all of the time, there are professionals who train individuals how to provide online teaching, or I'm sorry, I'm not remote learning, who provide technology and training on this. Are we considering whether bringing in individuals who have specific knowledge of how to teach in this way, in these sorts of formats, and how that might benefit the district?
We aren't. If you have some ideas or some resources, it'd be great to get them to to Nicole about that. Folks,
Internally.
we haven't spent we've spent very little time training our teachers to do any sort of remote or online learning because we've never done that. And we have been focused on training them and helping support them to do it face to face in the classroom. So, we are very concerned about our ability to get folks to, be experts on this in this new universe necessarily. In this, even though it may be 2 months, which seems like an eternity at this point, a very short time, while they're also trying to maintain just what they're able to do. I feel like it's akin to, we're building a plane right now while we're flying it. That's phase 1. And now with phase 2, we also have to build another plane. While we keep on flying the first plane, we're still building. And that's I don't want to raise people's expectations too high, honestly, because this is a territory that no district has covered before. And very few districts, if any, that we have found are doing it in a online virtual learning hours per day. The superintendents have been talking very recently right now about folks are talking about that, but certainly we haven't seen real examples of that really happening other than maybe a one-off school here or there.
We also do have the capacity to train teachers on how to use the technical aspect of running classes online. The best practice part of it, we don't have because it's not something that we have done. And I'm not sure how many people have done it outside of folks who are teaching college level classes. So we have the tools that can do online classes. I think we have the internal capacity to train folks on how to run classes, but the quality of that, I can't attest to.
And do I not recall from some of the discussion last week that when you get into actual teaching online, that is a contract negotiation that we have not had. Am I correct in that? I think that was what was said last week.
Barbara, I'd suspect that that's not quite right, given the fact that the governor has just ordered that all of the districts are responsible for providing continued instruction, and the fact that statement was signed off on by all of the state level unions. So we signed a contract that I disagree with what you said, Ben, that stipulated that all PSB educators are to be using PSB platforms in order to connect with their kids. There really is no other way for them to connect with kids without using PSB platforms. So they must be using PSB platforms, and they will either be competent in them or they need to become competent in that. So I don't really see that as being an issue, Barbara.
Well, I think it would be good to clarify it, because how you do instruction when you are actually teaching online is different from maintaining instruction and giving people work and activities. I just would check to make sure. I would check with the union to see what they said.
The next question that we had on this.
Julie, if I could just, this is Suzanne, if I could just jump in. So we're about a half hour behind and we have a lot to cover. So I don't know if you want to set a time limit on this conversation or just not worry about it, but I'm just putting it out there that we're a good half hour behind, if not a little more.
Mm-hmm. And I know that when you sent out your email previewing what we had hoped to accomplish today in light of the commission's new recommendations, you expected that this portion of the meeting would take longer than we had originally budgeted for in time. Do you have thoughts on that?
I'd like to address just 2 questions that are in the chat and then move on, because as Susan said, we have a lot of ground to cover in this meeting.
I'd like to ask that you just please read the questions out loud.
Sure.
So that they're part of the public record.
Sure. Who is the right person to set expectations with parents about what they should expect over the next 5 weeks? Principal, question mark, department head, teacher. I suspect it differs by grade band. It doesn't need to be 100% consistent, but we do need to communicate what we are planning. So that's from Susan. So what we are trying to do at this point, what we will do for phase 2 is at the coordinator director level and principal level is come up with some clear expectations and guidelines for the whole district and give real clear examples and samples of what a day could look like both for a teacher and for a student. And that is at different grade bands. It's going to be hard, as it always is, to pull in teachers to get input on that. But I think what's likely is we'll put out much clearer guidelines, and then folks will interpret and adjust as necessary. I mean, I can think of one grade 2 team where 2 teachers are quite savvy and quite well familiar with a bunch of online different platforms or resources, that sort of stuff, and where another teacher just isn't at all. And so we are still going to have variation here, but we do need, in light of the commissioner's guidelines, need to put out things that are much clearer, much more concrete about what teachers and also students can expect in a typical day. I'm going to move on. Wait, sorry, I just got to move back up. This is also from Susan, following up on Julie's question. The inequities are pretty stark already. In the absence of public school materials being provided, some families have hired 3 to 4 tutors for their kids, and others have much more limited resources. Not providing enough creates pretty complicated inequities. Not easy, but we need to talk about equity differently. Listen, this is a driving concern for everyone in the school department. I think Julie put it out there pretty starkly. There are different things here. One, what can a K to 2 or 3 grade student do on their own, without adult support? And the fact that for any number of reasons, 2 parents working, 1 parent working, no parents available because of all sorts of different reasons, we have that issue. And if we put out a lot of new learning, new instruction that is parent dependent, we will have significant inequities. I wish we had the answer for that, but I'm not sure anyone has the answer for that yet. But it's something we'll continue to work on and adjust on and try to, deal with in the week and weeks to come. I just don't want to promise folks something that as if we can magically do it when it's hugely complicated.
I hear you, Ben. I guess I'm just not, I don't know, maybe others have heard it. I'm not hearing enough of we understand that these are the plan, that this is the plan. We understand that these are the concerns and challenges, and here's the plan for how we're going to address that.
So,
or what's the timeline for figuring out how it is we're going to address that? So
as Commissioner Riley said, he said early April, and for us, that's going to be April 6th, as it is for Newton, as for other districts, okay? So you will see a shift on April 6th, okay? I don't know what that shift will be yet. I can't tell you that. I wish I could, but we have to take this information, take what we've been doing already this week. Our teachers are adjusting day to day. Monday to Tuesday was, if I had the chat function on in my Google Meet or my Zoom, it causes this sort of, disruption. What guidelines do I have to have for chat? Okay. Another lesson was, trying to think about this, was, another a music teacher I was talking to realized that his videos weren't as engaging as his classroom instruction. So he was learning, in real time over the course of 2 days, how to make his video presentations much more engaging. So it's that level of adjustment that's happening now. And then there's another level of adjustment in terms of guidelines, parameters, expectations that has to happen in this upcoming week. And so I understand people are impatient. I hear that. I realize it. It is a tremendous amount of pressure. And, we are dealing with, like I said, building a plane while we're flying it, and now having to build a new plane.
I understand what you're saying, but all I hear you talking about is technological engagement. I do not hear an educational plan for the district moving forward. I can see in the chat box that Susan has asked questions about expectations. I want to know whether or not children are going to be having access to the curriculum in a timeline that is consistent with where they were in school. If not, is there going to be a delay? What are you anticipating is going to have happen here? I have significant questions about the amount of time that we are spending talking about the distance between remote learning, virtual learning, and online learning, and whether or not people are struggling with the difference between Aspen and Google Classrooms. Can we please talk about the quality of education that we will be providing to our children over the next 2 months?
I think I was pretty clear in that the next version of what we'll be doing after this upcoming week of planning and figuring out will be launched on April 6th. That is the timeline. Okay. If you want a different timeline, I don't know how we can actually provide that to you. Okay. But we are dealing with fundamental issues about how to just get this done. And to expect the Rolls Royce is, all right.
You know, I simply want to say that everybody today, I don't mean here and now, I mean much broader than that, is in a very stressful situation. People are doing what they can. This is not going to be suddenly online school every day with people out there teaching. It simply isn't. And I actually think that's for the best. I think that part of what we can do during this period is help children learn how to, in a kind of way, help themselves to find out what is of interest to them, to help them be not always dependent on adults to learn everything. What questions do they have? What's going through their mind right now? Have them write down their questions. Have them describe a day in their life. Have them go, walk around outside with someone and see what surprises them. There are all kinds of things that you can do that are not standing up and going through routine material. And I think this is an opportunity to encourage people to think more broadly about what it means to be educated, because a lot of that has to be done with independent thinking and figure out how to find out what you want to find out. We're talking about a couple of months, and I realize that is when you're at home with children and you don't know what to do, that can be a lot of time. But I think we need to be very careful about what our expectations are here and be a little bit more creative than perhaps some people are thinking.
Barbara, I just want to add that I really appreciate that sentiment and that note, because I can tell you staff are working hard to figure this out. And it all comes from a good place, and they themselves are handling a lot at home that we don't have a full picture of. And I think at the end of the day, the most important thing is everybody's health and well-being.
But Casey, I hear you, but then we should set the expectation that this is a time that it's too much for teachers to teach because they have things that, and so there's not an expectation. Like, I think that right now we're in this place where we're not in agreement on what the expectations are and on what that looks like. And if we're not teaching, if we're not engaging and learning, then we should be honest that we're not doing that. And we need to find, maybe this is summer and then we come back over summer instead. I mean, if this is time for learning, we need to figure out how we're going to provide that learning to our students.
And by all means, please, let's make sure that we tell the governor's office that we've decided that despite the fact that every other district in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is now expected to provide online instruction and is supposed to be thinking about, I mean, actually probably should have already had a plan for how to do that, given the fact that we haven't had just 2 weeks out of school. We had 4 weeks of a pre-epidemic buildup to prepare. We just don't feel like we can do it because it's just too much. I don't know what to do with this sort of feedback.
Sorry, I don't hear anyone on this phone call saying that, or saying that we can't do this or we can't do this well. So it's hard for me to understand how folks are jumping. It seems to me some folks jumping to that conclusion. Okay, and I'm sorry, but I'll also push back of the 4-week buildup to this school closure. We actually were all very busy, all our teachers and everyone, teaching class during the. So this notion that and also. I also hear claims that other districts are doing all of this or all of that. Well, I'm sorry, but if I talk to superintendents, Newton, Wellesley, Andover, Needham, they are actually providing the same thing we are, if not less. So so full stop on that. Like, we are going to put into place, yes, as the governor has said, as the commissioner said, new instruction, okay, new learning, okay. I'm just saying right now, at this moment, we don't have the exact guidelines and parameters about how that will happen and how it will happen equitably, and we need some time to actually work that through, particularly, most likely, with our union partners.
I'm sorry, so you said April 6th will be the time when this will be available. So you're saying that, let me see, we have to wait 11 more days before we will be rolling out instruction. So we will have been out of school for 3 weeks before we're rolling out the presentation of new content to children.
We have been out of school for a week right now.
We have been out of school for more than a week. And we will, and we are 11 days away from the 6th.
No, 6.
No, we've been out for 2 weeks now. We're on a new Thursday. We started on a Thursday 2 Thursdays ago. So we're in
lost track of time. I hope that can be people understand that.
No, it's 100%.
And the 6th is Monday. It's only 6 days away. 6 working days.
So I think the assumption here is that learning is not happening now, that teaching is happening now. I think that's a false assumption. Okay, I mean, our teachers are providing resources. Our kids are learning at home. Now, I know there's wide variation in that, okay? As we all know, every single day in our schools there's wide variation on that, okay? What we're doing now will continue into next week. And during next week, we will have clear, I expect us to have clearer parameters, clearer guidelines for what a day should look like. Okay, we have not built this yet. I am being honest about that. And by the 6th, we will launch a different revised approach.
And in the meantime,
you referenced that you've been having some discussions with other superintendents. Could you go into a little more detail about that in terms of any resources or suggestions they're offering, or anything that you are seeing in other districts that might be useful for us to incorporate here?
No, the conversations I've had with other folks at this point, via email and on the phone, have been really playing out this same discussion we're having here, which is they're getting pressure about this notion that other districts, quote unquote, other districts are doing this, but none of us know any other districts that are doing this, okay, in terms of our peer districts. And there's wide variation of what this is, okay? At this point, speaking today, there's wide variation in terms of their classrooms and what teachers are providing, just like there is in ours. So I'm happy to look at other models, and we are happy to look at other models. Folks, we have not seen them at this point.
I think we have a number of the, so Robin's going to print out all of the comments that are from the text box in the chat. There are a number of them that talk about some of the inequities. And I wanted to just mention a little bit of, where on the inequities that are happening, what we're seeing happen is that there are parents or families that are able to create a school environment with new learning that is happening by hiring tutors to have a math tutor, a science tutor, an ELA tutor, a speech tutor if it's needed, and that they are restructuring the day so that there are groups of children, parent families that are getting together and recreating this. And that is happening now. And I think that will continue to happen, that there will be more of that going on. And the inequities that will be happening for those who are able to have private pay services that have been able to figure out how to provide learning in this sort of environment versus, if we're not able to provide that. I mean, I'm having a really hard time with it. And we're seeing it on one of the PTO pages today. Someone popped up and is looking for other people to join in on doing this. And Russian math class groups are doing these lessons. They are having classes of 6 and 8 children, and they are providing 2 hours of instruction. And that is happening now already. It has already started. And so I hear you about how do we do this big scale? How do we have full days of learning? How do we do all of this? But I just wonder if there are not pockets where we could model some of these private tutors, we could model some of the other programs and provide small group instruction, at different points in the day. So 5 of the kids meet at this time and 5 of the kids meet at this time, and to do it in that way. I just wonder if there are not additional things that we could be doing between now and April 6th to help support all of the kids, not just those whose parents are going out and getting these sorts of services in the interim.
Yeah, and can I just add on to that for a second? I think that there is no way that we will ever replicate someone hiring 3 private tutors for their child. There just isn't. Full stop. We will never, ever, ever replicate that. However, I think that the conversation that I have heard about inequity is, well, if we can't provide something that all children can access, then we should not be providing anything because it would be inequitable to the kids who aren't accessing it. And I think we need to talk about equity differently, because what's happening is many, many children are accessing things and other children are not. So that's already happening. So I guess I would pull back the question on equity and reframe it a little bit to say, first of all, I have zero confidence we're going back to school on May 4th, and I think we would be foolish to plan for that. Full stop. Other people may be different, but maybe we need a school committee vote on how long do we feel like we should be planning for, because for sure planning this in sets of 2 to 3 week increments is going to be like hell on everyone. The teachers will hate it, the parents will hate it, the children will be disrupted. We can't administer it. There's no way we can do this in 2 to 3 week increments. And so for sure, I appreciate that week 1 was just getting the MOA and week 2 was just figuring out where the bathroom was and how to do technology. I get all of that. And I'm so grateful for everyone for just diving in the middle of this like massive 100-year flu pandemic crisis. So all of that is true. I guess what I'm more concerned about is as we go forward, as we think about not just the next 2 weeks, not just next week and not just April 6th to May 4th, but like if we assume that we're not going to go back to the rest of the year, which I do, and most districts are, assuming, many districts are, I shouldn't say most, are assuming that they're not going to go back. They're not necessarily planning that way, but I haven't heard anybody who thinks, oh, absolutely, we're back in the building. Then what does it mean to try to do essentially April, May, and June of instruction in a substandard, suboptimal, totally challenging environment? And I just think that if we think about this as a 3-month problem, we might get to a really different place from if we're trying to bootstrap it every 2 weeks and like come up with 2.0 and 3.0 and 4.0 every 2 weeks. So I guess my question is just, as we think about our goals for the year, And I appreciate the frenzy that's kind of gone into this year. But just as we think about our goals for the year, what is it that we can realistically expect from our gen ed curriculum for K-5, 6-8, and high school? And how might we think about what we can expect for kids over that time frame? And then work backwards into, okay, certainly we have technological constraints. Certainly we have, bandwidth constraints and all of that. But I'm still not quite hearing, how might we think differently about our vision for what we want our kids to get? And I agree that there's we're getting a little bit caught up in the technology and the frenzy. And I just feel like some group of people, and I do feel like it has to include principals, department heads. I think it has to include teachers. We're certainly paying for a tremendous amount of time, that people can kind of come together and think about what is a multi-week, multi-month plan. And I think if we don't do that, these inequities are going to get worse and not better. I think special education is this whole other thing. But I guess part of what I'm reacting to is sort of the disconnect in my mind between the resources that we're asking for on this budget and the gap between the kind of things that we might want to be thinking about and the resources we would need to get there. So sorry about that. I was having challenges earlier with background noise, but I really do want us to be thinking a little bit more broadly. And I do think that it's the school committee's role to think about learning expectations, grade level learning expectations. We don't pick curriculum, we don't pick platforms, but it is our responsibility to think about grade level learning expectations. And so I just really want us to be thoughtful. Maybe it's in the curriculum subcommittee meeting about goals for the rest of the year that we can reasonably expect our children to get.
I want to pick up on this. I'm sorry. I'm just going to pop right in. I just want to say, to follow up on Susan's point, as a school committee member, I certainly have not voted on, nor will I support any initiative that suggests that we are not going to be providing new learning opportunities to children until April 6th. There has never been an opportunity for me personally to vote on shutting down new learning and new access to curriculum from the day that we closed on the 13th until April 6th. And I absolutely will not support it. I think we need to take some really significant steps, outside of, the technical framework of the PSB in order to start to move this forward as quickly as we possibly can in order to tap into all of the resources that we have available. First of all, I'm going to say, I think we need to hire a consultant who can come in, who focuses on elementary grade online learning, who can work with teachers around the content that they know in order to get them up and running and provide them with the information that they need about managing their chat situations and managing group dynamics and managing small group instruction and managing, the provision of materials, and, getting everybody in line as quickly as we can, as soon as possible. I do not believe, based on the conversation that I'm hearing, that we are equipped within the PSB today to be able to solve this situation tomorrow. I also want to say that I really think that it is important that the school committee organize a task force around this, because us having once a week to come in and get an update on this while, we are hearing on a daily basis about the needs and concerns of children, every single day, and we're not able to bring this to your attention. And when we are bringing it to your attention, we're being told we'll work on it. We probably need a different structure of accountability and a different structure of oversight for this time period. And finally, I'm going to say, I do actually believe that children and the people who speak for them, parents, are not being represented in these conversations, and that they haven't been well represented in these conversations in the last few weeks. And I think that it is urgently important that within the next 2 business days, we have an online forum in which parents can come and ask questions to the school leadership and to school leaders about what is going on with online learning in this district and what is going on with remote instruction in this district and what our plan is going to be. Now, I agree with you, Susan. There needs to be a lot of conversations about what's going to happen heading forward into the future, but we need to start taking the throttle off and liberate our educators to have those conversations. We have now had 2 consecutive weeks of throttling back our capable educators and our capable school leaders, from putting together these plans. So I don't know, those are basically my 3 things that I think that we really, really, really need to do. I hope that other people kind of see the merits in that. I have concerns about pushing this over to the curriculum subcommittee, unless if the curriculum subcommittee is interested in convening an emergency meeting.
Jennifer, you haven't had a chance to speak on this. Do you want to go next? And then Barbara, I see that you wanted to say something as well.
So I hear a lot of discussion about the new learning and distance learning. And I hear and I understand all those concerns. And I just want to put into the conversation something I don't think that we've really talked enough about or have any answers to at this point, which is we talk about the equity piece, but what do we as a district or as a school committee, what are the expectations for family participation in this education? So we're hearing a lot from people who want, or in this conversation, I'm hearing a lot of voice about children needing and wanting more online learning, more structure. And I understand all of that, but how are we going to make sure that everyone is actually going online and accessing that education? Because we don't have a mechanism for that to make sure that everyone is actually participating. Am I being clear here? Like that everyone from home on the home end is participating in that. So that's where my concerns around the equity are. I think we've done some work on getting access to technology in order to access the learning, whether that's someone posts something, an activity that's done offline, or if it's something that's being done, recorded or live. That's where we're going to see, as we develop more online learning or more resources or more activities, that we're going to have a lot of inequity. Say we come to May or June, that all this new learning may have happened, and then a whole group of students who have not been participating in those activities did not get access to that. And so we offered it, but it wasn't accessed. And so that's a concern that I have, and I don't know how we grapple with it.
Jennifer, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. Are you talking about, so how would we touch base with parents to see if they have been able to access, to see that the children have been able to access? Or do we need to have a conversation about what level of parental responsibility we're wanting for someone to sit next to the kid and do the student and do the work with?
I think maybe I'm thinking about it a little bit more all right, students come to school, we keep attendance records. We know that students are attending. What will happen if we post in the future, say we enter into new learning, what if students are not participating in that learning? What will happen? Or what is the follow-up? What mechanisms do we have or not have is really my point, to make sure that students are attending and that they're engaged in the activities we're putting out there. Does that make sense?
Is one way to address something like this that if you had just saying as an option, like a weekly Zoom meeting, and so then at that meeting, you physically see the children and you are able to know that they showed up at that time and day, and then to talk with each of the kids about, have you been able to print things off? What can I help you with? Do you need something mailed to you? That sort of conversation.
So I guess that also, maybe that's a mechanism to help that, but say teachers, and I know this is all very theoretical, but say people are posting things and right now we're not grading, but say we move to a mechanism where in the future we are starting to produce new learning and things are being graded and students are not turning work in, they're not accessing that. They're not participating on the other end. And for lots of really possibly really good, reasonable reasons that there's no one there to help make sure that structure is happening at home, that they're able to access the information and the learning, that they're getting online, that they're actually, engaging in the work. I just don't know what mechanisms school departments have to make sure that kids and families are actually participating in that. Am I being clear? Sorry.
Yeah, Jennifer, if I could jump in, the truth is, the reality is that when the students do come back to school, teachers will need to go over any new material that they presented online or even through other resources and materials to make sure that all students, in fact, got that information and understood it and were able to learn it. So no
What
matter
if we don't go back? Right?
well, I'm sorry,
What if we don't go back this year? Like, so what I'm just thinking, you know, I'm just sort of playing this out in my mind about what could this look like and how can we really make sure that students are getting access to the information and the learning that they need to. And so I just want to make it part of the conversation is we can put a lot of stuff out there. How do we make sure we're getting it back?
next fall, teachers are we don't go back until next fall, teachers, whenever we go back, the teachers are going to do review sessions on the new materials that they taught while we were not in school, because there's going to be a wide range of competency and mastery for our students that they learned at home. So just be aware that this is going to impact everybody, and that we cannot guarantee mastery if we do not have the children in front of us, or we cannot demand that they do the work.
Why is this any different than a traditional classroom setting from the perspective of, if children are not turning in the work, we know that they are not turning it in? There could be a couple of reasons for that. Either they're just not doing the work because they don't want to, or it's an access issue. But either way, when that comes up in a traditional classroom environment, I assume the teacher reaches out to the parents, or an administrator does, has a conversation. Is your child just not engaged, or is your child unaware that he or she should be doing X, Y, Z? So I'm not sure why this should be any different.
Because in a classroom, David, you would have lots and lots of extra help, and the teacher would be right there. So you would have, specialists, coaches, resource room people, paraprofessionals.
Obviously, in the moment, yes, it's very different. But in terms of getting the homework in, if there's an expectation that something is going to be collected from each child, and say 5 children in the class, nothing is received, then we know there's a lack of engagement there. So it's not perfect, but it's not as though there's zero.
And Suzanne, we still have all of those resources to deploy. We still, all of those people that you described who would be available in a school setting, I mean, it's a different setting, and we'd have to find different ways that they can reach the students, but all of those people are still available. And I feel like in this time that we're in, we have all of these wonderful resources and really smart people who could help the students. And are the math specialists reaching out to students who needed extra help, and we're getting extra help on math? And are our guidance counselors reaching out to students who weren't great about turning in homework before, and are they turning in, engaging now? I think as we have all of these really wonderful resources in our district, it's just going to be figuring out how to utilize them and utilize their skills.
But I think Sharon is absolutely right. Not Sharon, Jennifer is absolutely right. You aren't going to know. And even if it's not as simple as David said, work turned in, work not turned in. Work can be turned in, and the child can still not understand it. It takes a teacher to really know how to figure out what children know. But I need to also say to you, I think that the staff has been working very hard. And this sense that they need to do more, we need to be teaching online, this needs to be like school online, I think that is foolishness. I don't think it can be. I think we probably will be out for the rest of the year. And there were going to be things learned and things not learned. And the most difficult thing you are going to have are the children who haven't done it. And that will fall on the people next year. It doesn't matter. You can drill this stuff online, but kids are home, parents are there. Some people will get it, some people won't. And the fact that we've suddenly become, we have to teach this every day, we need to do this, that, or the other, isn't going to work. And even the business about talking about getting kids together with tutors, that's not helpful to anybody, because we are supposed to be keeping apart. That is part of it. And I understand that children are not as big, don't get this as easily. But you still do not want them in play groups. We said that recently. And now we're talking about learning groups. which I know that we as a school would not necessarily be asking for, but that seems to be one of the things that is happening. So I look at this and I say, this is a time that is unlike any we've been through before. We will do the best that we can to keep kids engaged and interested in learning, but it will not be a replica of what they could have in school. That won't work. So you need to be realistic. You can be as strident as you want about what we should do and how we should do it, but it won't work. So we need to think about what will work and how we can make kids stay interested in learning and want to get back to school when they finally do.
So I just want to respond a little bit to David. One of the things, and the things that I'm talking about are really just questions that I want to put out to the district in general, just to make sure that we have a mechanism for scooping up kids who might not be turning in work, and that we're really thinking about that, and not that that should preclude us from doing anything different. But I think the difference for me is it's different when it's homework, and that might take an hour or two, depends on the grade level. We're talking about all of the work being done at home. It's such a significant volume that I just, we're hearing from families who are struggling with help, like just making sure the kids are online or that they're accessing it or getting them on Canvas or getting them onto Google Classroom. It's just a lot to manage for families. And I just want us to be cognizant that, there's a wide range of family experiences and needs and wants right now. And I just want to make sure that I'm just putting it out as questions so that we make sure as a district that we have mechanisms in place and procedures for making sure that if kids aren't getting, work in, that we have an outreach mechanism so we can sort of problem solve that. And, so I just want to put it out there as a question. And so I think there's a lot that we can do, and that's already happening. I see it in the information I'm getting from teachers now. And I just think it needs to be part of the conversation. We just need to be thoughtful about it.
All right. Is anyone who hasn't had a chance to,
Helen, you're on mute.
Helen?
You're on mute.
Thank you. I thought I'm talking to myself. I guess it's 7:00. I'd like to suggest the following. Because of the urgency of this, I understand it. I think, Barbara, if you would be willing to consider to have a online meeting the beginning of next week or tomorrow, but tomorrow we can't post it, so it'd have to be a subcommittee meeting.
I think though we could call Helen, I think there could be an emergency meeting in light of the commissioner's findings.
All right. I think
I don't know if it is.
Figure out our schedules if people are available. I just think we're sort of going around in circles at this point, and I don't think we're getting any. I mean, we're getting very good information, but there's no way forward yet. So it would seem to me if we could sit, curriculum subcommittee, anybody else who wants to join, and maybe get a few teachers if we can from different experiences happening out there, because I think we all make these assumptions, some according to what your kids are getting and some according to what we think might be happening. And I think that we need to sort of move on, but I think we need to have a plan in place to deal with this.
Barbara, can you and Robin work together to try to get a curriculum subcommittee meeting scheduled?
Yes, Nicole and I I've already reached out to her.
Okay.
And there is one coming up the first week in April, I think.
No, it's the second week, actually. I looked at it just now.
Move it up to this week. That's not a problem. I will need to talk to her about it.
Okay. And the other thing is, I know we don't have public, I don't know, we just have public comment tonight. Sorry. We don't have public comment in our meeting schedule tonight. Barbara, if you could plan as part of that curriculum subcommittee, an opportunity for members of the public to be able to share some of their thoughts, I think that would be a good place that people are wanting to, and that would be a good place for us to have some of that conversation and input. So I'm just going to ask if you could make part of the meeting dedicated to public comment. I think that would be helpful. Jennifer, sorry to interrupt you. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to get a little clarity about what the expectations are that the curriculum subcommittee will do. Like, what is the goal of the meeting and what are we hoping will be the outcome of that? Just as a member of the committee, I would just like to get feedback on the purpose and the goals and what it is we want as an outcome.
Well, my original plan for the meeting in a couple of weeks was to look at what was being done, what was working, how things were going, and hearing from some of the people involved in this. So my guess is that that's basically what we will do. And if people want to have a public comment period, we can do that. And we can see what it is that people think about what is happening and what isn't happening. But I think it's very difficult to begin to make judgments about what is and isn't happening when in fact we have been told tonight by Ben that things will not be ready, or things are not quite completely in place yet. So we're asking people if things are working and what they're thinking without having everything actually settled. I wonder, Ben, what you think about this.
Sure. I think it'd be helpful to get the committee's input on phase 2 of this. So if we have a few days to put together, what we think are our guidelines, parameters for what teachers, schools, a variety of folks should be doing in the new phase. Based on the guidance from the commissioner. Based on the input from the committee here. I think it'd be helpful for the subcommittee to give input on that, and that would focus, I think, the conversation into something that's concrete. Wednesday would be ideal for that, so then we can, or Tuesday or Wednesday, I'm not really sure what day, but so we can have some of that in place and get your feedback on it.
Okay.
I personally would like to see the issues of equity and educational material separated somewhat. I know that there's a relationship, but I don't want the conversation to be so focused on access issues that we're not providing content to anybody. And I know that's not what's happening now, but sometimes it sounds like we're only focusing on whether people are accessing, but what is it that they're accessing? That's obviously an important piece as well. And I want to make sure that those two issues are treated separately because as Susan mentioned in the chat, and I agree with her, equity, equity is going to be an issue either way, and equity might even be a bigger problem if we don't do anything. So I would like those two issues to be treated separately.
Can I just add one thing?
I don't want equity to be used as a reason for why we do not proceed with rolling out with some kind of program. There should be something that gets rolled out.
I agree.
Just one thing, if it's helpful, having been a curriculum chair, I think what the school committee's role is always complicated in curriculum, and it's especially complicated now. So just a couple thoughts on what might be helpful for us to do. First of all, I think it would be helpful for us to hear from people, principals, teachers, as to how it's going. I think it'd just be helpful to hear from them. People who, and there are a variety of ways to do that, but I think it's important for us to hear from them. I think the second thing is that if we can set out a couple of guiding principles or design principles, I think that will be helpful. If I will tell you mine, which is that I don't think we're going back to school this year. I don't think we should be planning like we're going to be going back to school on May 4th. If we all agree on that, which we may or may not, that would be actually a really important thing for the school committee to say to the administration and to the budget process and our teachers and parents and everybody else. I think it would be helpful to say if we all think things, people should get feedback, meaningful feedback, but they shouldn't be graded, whatever that means. Like, I think there are some high level things that we can say that would be quite helpful and directive without being micromanaging, but they would be kind of vision for the statement. I think how we think about equity is one of them, right? And so I worry a lot. I don't think I am not worried about the parents who are getting 3 and 4 tutors for their kids. I'm worried about exactly the parents that Jennifer was talking about, which is the ones who cannot or either are unable or for whatever reason can't provide the kind of resources and instruction that other parents can. So I'm actually more worried about that in this environment than not. And so it just seems to me that if we have essentially the same number of educators in a very, very difficult situation, but you also have a number of kids who are going to be able to do this either on their own or with their parents, we're actually reducing the number of kids that we have to be really focused on in this sort of way. And so at any rate, I just think that we're going to have to rethink a little bit how we do this. But at any rate, I think that there's probably helpful guidance that we could give that would not be, too crazy, because all of this has to be realistic. Everyone is working really hard. Everyone's heart is in the right place. We all want the best for the kids and for our staff and for the families, but we just sort of have to think about what's realistic.
Ben, you're wanting to say something?
Yeah, just quickly, we're planning this next phase as if it will go through the end of the year. Okay, we're not 2 weeks and 2 weeks. I just want to put that to rest. Okay, obviously that's not an announcement from the superintendent that we're going to the end of the year. Okay, but that's the way we plan this. We expect to have the next phase be something that can last through the end of the year.
I don't think anybody will hold it against you if we don't go to the.
and the governor will make that decision. Okay, but when we go back in, but we want the next phase of this to last. Not to, as Susan was saying, plan for being out the rest of the year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there other suggestions as far as guiding, in line with what Susan was saying? Other things that we think we can set as guiding principles as we think about the conversation at curriculum?
Well, I think it would be helpful if parents could give, if we do open it up to public comment, if people can be prepared to give some constructive comments as to what we could possibly do, things that they've tried, things that, they would like to see, but in a constructive way. I think that would be helpful.
And then I also think if we're not going to try to attack everything, either we try to include special education and English learners and other populations who might have other issues here, or we do it elsewhere, but we kind of can't do that one halfway because that's going to be a whole conversation in and of itself. So I just want to put that out there as well.
I think we start with general education and then, maybe the next curriculum subcommittee delves into, because there are more issues that need to be dealt with. The next one, which is a week later, could work on English learners and we could get, Casey and Mindy to come and talk with us about what is specific to those groups.
So then we'll transition to the next part of the agenda now that we have a plan to have a curriculum subcommittee and continue this conversation there. Before we do, I just wanted to have one other thing. We've talked briefly about the new instruction, and I've heard from a few teachers that they've been told by the district, I don't know by whom, but that a few teachers have said that they are not supposed to be providing any new instruction or new learning. And I just want to see if there's clarification that we can receive about whether that is the expectation, or in phase one, if new learning, a new instruction, new curriculum can take place if teachers are feeling comfortable doing that.
I would never hold back our teachers from doing great things.
Okay. So I have heard, we have heard this from a number of teachers, and teachers have put it in writing to the student. They have been told that they cannot provide this. I don't know where the disconnect is, but I think that that's an area that could use immediate clarification, just as we're looking to develop this next phase, that if there are teachers who are ready, that they don't feel like we are holding them back from doing that.
Jennifer?
I would just say yes, and I think it needs to be consistent. I think if that's the message, I think we run the risk. I think then that's what we should be. If that's what we're going to do, then everybody should be doing that. And I think there's not clarity around that right now, and that we need to. But so I'm just wondering, what happens if one teacher or one school goes ahead and then other schools are not, I don't know. I just think that it should be consistent. That's what we're going to do, then that's what we're going to do. And if we're not ready, we're going to launch that in a week when people have had time to prepare for that, because that kind of teaching and learning looks very different than, I'm less concerned about people being able to access the technology to implement that kind of teaching versus like, what does that actually look like? Like, what will teachers, like, what does that look like? And people will need time to prepare that. I mean, that's where my thinking is. So if new learning is what's happening, I think that needs to be a clear message, and I think it needs to be consistent, or we'll have even further inequity.
I think we need to review the emergency budget, right, Julie?
Yes.
Mary Ellen? So that's in the
Sure, do you want me to show the, you want me to put the document up?
No, I think everyone should be able to look at it. It's in the Google Drive folder. Also, it was emailed to you as well. So can you just go along,
Is this something that's available on the website, or do you think it would be helpful to have it on the DocuCam just in case people are watching and are interested in, I don't know.
Let me see if I can share it and walk through it. And you all see it?
Yes, thank you, Mary Ellen.
Okay, great. So this is a rough draft. It will be, sorry, Ben?
Yeah.
Were you starting? Is it okay for me to start?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. No, yeah. You just might. I think you can zoom in on yours, which will help all of us. All.
How's that? Better?
A lot better.
You need it larger?
Yes, it's fine.
That's good.
Is that okay?
Too big.
Sorry, it's off my screen. All right, so over the last 2 weeks, Matt and I have been with the custodian and food service team launching and sort of getting town response settled. So, and you guys have been negotiating the BEU MOA. And we've had a variety of different activity. And so here's kind of where we are now. And then the announcement of school being closed through to May 4th provides or presents a different opportunity or a different situation, which this does not reflect that announcement. And so based on the BEU MOA, we will not be paying teachers, even if we go through school through, June 29th, not June 30th. The MOA covers that. We're unsure of and may have additional days with regards to our Unit B members, and those will be handled as they have typically been handled, which is through Nicole Gitten's Office of Teaching and Learning as pool days. The unknown that is going to take a little bit more research because the para contract has a clause in it where they get paid when school is closed. So we may have 5 additional days that we actually have to pay the paraprofessionals if we return back to school for June through June 29th, and what that looks like. Due to a state of an emergency, our custodians get paid double time. And as you heard in the opening, Ben complimented them, and they are doing a significant amount of work. They're helping out the town public building division, police and fire with the extra sort of workload of disinfecting. And so we are trying to get those double time charges charged off to a COVID-19 account and reserve fund transfer. However, because our buildings are closed and now closed for a month and a half, we have the potential of a rental facilities revenue shortfall. And I'll address the revolving funds at the end. Food service will also have a revenue shortfall as well. We are tracking, and I'll get a summary of the first week and this week out to the members so you can see what we're doing or how we're doing. with that. We're basically 71 students are ordering meals, and because we're only open Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they're allowed to take double meals for the off days on the weekend. So that's why we're at 500 meals for the week and a half. Our long-term subs, we will be paying, agreed to pay. So estimated right now, we'll get a better estimate of this is for the 5 days in June. Because long-term subs get paid on a per diem basis, they do not get paid on an annual salary or contractual basis. And typically our long-term subs would not be paid for a non-school day. Daily subs, we're looking at that right now in terms of this is a potential sort of cost avoidance. I'm going to say it's not necessarily a savings, but it's cost avoidance. Generally, we hire over 50 substitutes a day on average. So since we won't be hiring those substitutes at 50 a day, that we'll be looking at that sub account to make sure that where if there are any balances out of that we can use to transfer and pay for the salaries not funded by a reserve fund transfer that are stated above. The next two lines have to deal with our supplies and cleaning supplies and materials we need to for the departments that are currently working. Most of this is the operations department and custodial services. We've already had one reserve fund transfer supporting purchases. There's another request that will be going around, I believe Melissa told me this week. So we will be submitting for additional reserve fund transfer for cleaning supplies and costs related to that. So hopefully that will essentially net out to zero. And if it doesn't, we will be submitting along with the town any cost reimbursement that may become eligible through MEMA or FEMA when we know that. The next line is I put in $100,000 because situations like this, I just don't know what will be expected. The town has had to purchase laptops and others to give to essential personnel to be able to VPN from home. We are pretty much set. We're also looking at, we have carts of laptops, for example, so can we repurpose some of our equipment and sort of not have to purchase any? But we're down to the last maybe 10 or 12 employees in that case, so not quite sure, but that's basically a placeholder.
Mary Ellen, can you just say that again? I'm not sure I followed what you just said.
In terms of the laptops and VPNs. Because all of our employees are working remotely, the town has a VPN for those that need to access Munis, for example, as our financial application. They will not load the VPN software on personal home computers. They will only issue it on a town-owned laptop. So they've had to make some purchases of laptops. We have some school employees that in the first wave of needing VPN didn't receive them. We're reviewing, now that we're going to be closed longer, we're reviewing sort of our next wave of people who may need VPN, and can we use some of our own laptops like the MacBooks. However, Munis and a MacBook don't communicate very well, but are there other resources we already have in our schools that we just repurpose for the short term and then return back to the classroom when it's done? That was what I was talking about. And then the last line, which is about right now is about $500,000, is we have, because we are paying employees and not having revenue, BEEP and rental facilities, and at this point, there are probably others, are going to have significant losses in and don't have fund balance to actually pay for those wages. I don't have base on here because base has $1 million, at least $1 million fund balance. However, this whole loss of an entire semester for them or course season for them will significantly drop their fund balance. So I will be talking to Michelle, the new director, in terms of where they're at. She's still wading through a variety of refunds and whatnot. But for right now, we have for BEEP and rental facilities, there are two important questions for the committee to have a discussion about and potentially approve. And that is the waiving of BEEP tuition, prorating it for March, not charging for April, and then seeing kind of where we are in May because we don't have attendance. But what that does to BEEP is that the wages that we're paying for teachers at this point, and staff and paraprofessionals, has no revenue source to fund that. So that will have to get picked up by the operating budget, unless, or minus whatever fund balance is left in the fund. And same with rental facilities. We've had requests from our extended day programs and specifically to be forgiven their lease amounts for prorated March and April, since they are also not taking in revenue and are also not providing service. And school committee would need to sort of vote on and opine on both of those in particular. And the third quarter report is basically, we're working on kind of an all funds report, both grants and revolving funds. We did get word late last week that we can charge wages for our employees on grants, even though school is not in session. So that was an important news to receive for us, because we would have also had to make up those wages. And
can you explain that again? I didn't understand that. Charge wages to what?
So we have employees on our grants, federal grants.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Right? And so typically when we're not in school, they would say you're not in school, they're not delivering services. It's your choice, local choice to pay them, not federal government's choice to pay them. We're not so-and-so's choice to pay them. But that word came in last week that we can continue paying those wages off of those grants. Right. What's not included in this analysis is the discussion you were having earlier this evening around instruction and any additional costs for professional development or PD or training like that. And the other piece that's also not included in here, and that Mindy is working on, is the cost of translations for all of the curriculum support that's being produced by teachers. And she was already experiencing a very stressed budget this year. We were actually already needing to fund her at least $10,000. And I don't know if that, she's looking at what the expense will be going forward as we move to sort of this online support. So I know that Regina's here to talk about and be available to talk about the BEEP situation with tuition. Before we get started, I do want to add that because I'm in the EOC and Lee Jackson, the Director of Recreation, is in the EOC as part of planning, me as logistics. Today, she and I had a conversation about what they were doing with Sewell and the Sewell tuition. And so what they're doing at Sewell is they're going to prorate the month of March and not charge for April, and then kind of wait and see what happens as April closes. Are we continuing to stay closed? Are we going to open? And then they would go from there. So just so you have that piece of information about what the recreation is doing. And she talked to her chair, Nancy O'Connell, get that name right, about that day. So are there questions, concerns, other things I may have omitted?
Mary Ellen, I don't know if I missed it. I heard you say that things that are not included in this budget were PD or training and things related to ELE and translations. I didn't hear anything about special education. Is that another bucket, or we have that bucket?
That would be another bucket. That would be any additional expenses regarding special education. One of the things I did talk to Casey about is what stress would be put on FY21 in terms of regression and services, any additional burden with regard to regression for students, which makes summer school potentially very important for a number of our special ed population or other populations that are vulnerable to regression or not accessing the curriculum. And are we, I haven't looked at the FY21 budget yet to see, what that impact would be. And we need to be planful for that, because 21 is already stressed in terms of its resources that are available.
Mary Ellen, I had a question. This covers the period through April 6th in the thinking in the ways of along the prior conversation about no one or very few, or maybe none of us is correct, that we think we're coming back this year, or if we assume we're not coming back this year, it's fair to assume that these numbers will just extrapolate out over those periods in terms of the additional funding needs.
So what the announcement today, actually, or yesterday, my days are all mixed together as well, was the sort of realization is I closed the budget May 1st. And so I made why not just close it now? And then whatever resource, we're not buying supplies and materials, for example, and sort of to the point of translations and special education and other new curriculum pieces is sort of reallocate those based on a new plan, because we're not buying our typical materials to deliver in a typical classroom. So we don't have any orders coming in. Close the budget now, sort of freeze the budget, and then see what we have left to then reallocate for a new normal.
Mary Ellen, though, would that limit our ability? So we hear a lot about reserve fund transfers, and there are we've heard some feedback that in emergencies of unanticipated, unexpected expenses, that is the place that we could go to the town and ask for a reserve fund transfer, and that would be the appropriate mechanism to cover some of those additional costs. If we were to close the budget on May 1, it sounds like some of those expenses would be shifted to next year, and we would be fully responsible for managing them within our budget. I wonder if this is a true mechanism that we could go and ask for a reserve fund transfer. Would it be better to keep the budget open for us to be able to have a more accurate picture of what those costs have been?
So let me be clear. The budget is closed to the budget managers. It's not closed to school committee. Okay. And what I would say is what I'm actually thinking today as a result of the announcement is actually closing the budget to the budget managers immediately, finishing out the third quarter report, making sure that we know exactly what our payrolls are going to be between now and the end of June, continue, charging the town for the cleaning supplies and disinfecting and what we've been doing to support the town to stay operating, continue pushing that off to reserve fund. And because the town this is when the school department pays back every single municipal department for all their support that we receive during the year is in times like these, because we have custodians, we have food service, we have transportation, we have resources ready to be able to do that. And then the rest of the budget really can then be left with, okay, what do we need to focus on curriculum and teaching and learning? And that's focused on teaching and learning. We don't necessarily go to the town for reserve fund for teaching and learning. But that's, and potentially we go to the town for a reserve fund transfer around the revolving funds and those costs, and separate those out, because those revenue losses are kind of out of our control. as well. So I think there's a way to sort of split the difference with the town to tap into both for support. The concern I have for 21, and Melissa and I are starting to have conversations, is what the economic and revenue shortage is going to be in local receipts. Is the state going to come through with the same level of Chapter 70? You know, what's the state legislature going to do? Because they're doing a large sort of support for this. So that's a big question as well. So more to come on that. I'm going to stop sharing the spreadsheet if that's okay.
Well, can I just ask one question?
Sure.
So the BEEP tuitions that we may not be getting, is that something that we could consider putting into the reserve fund transfer?
I would give it a try.
I would too. I mean,
I'd rather give it a try and be told no.
We wanted to not have school. It's not that we tried to, not, and then the second question is, are the teachers in BEEP able to do any kind of online teaching, or is that just?
So Regina should answer that. I'm going to stop sharing this, and then Regina can answer that.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Yes, our BEEP teachers are doing a variety of things supporting students. They are struggling, as our teachers at all levels, becoming familiar with the new format. Also, it is a little bit of a developmental mismatch to expect young children to be able to get content.
Said, are they able to? Yeah, exactly.
Right, exactly. We believe in hands-on experiential learning. So it is a challenge. We have developed a resource guide for families that we shared. We do a daily BEEP challenge that we're sending out weekly. We're exploring with our contracted music instructors. Actually, next week, we're going to pilot it with one of our instructors. And if we can get that up and going, continuing that music program. And our teachers are doing a variety of things. Most are trying to do something 2 to 3 times a week, usually a circle, a story, a drawing activity. One little girl had a little birthday party, and all the kids sang to her, and she blew out the candles virtually. So there were some sweet moments in that way. Attendance at these activities, they typically last 20 minutes to 30 minutes, which is about all you can get a young child to sit there. Has been excellent. In a classroom of 16, we'll have 16, 15 students attending. One teacher today I spoke to had prepared little packets of materials, like she actually ordered them from some teacher in North Carolina. I said, please send me the link. But she ordered, every child will get a little packet that has a certain type of Lego. Every kid would have the same thing. So when she's doing something, they can manipulate it with her. And she told the families that was coming. So people are trying to be creative. They had a show and tell, a virtual show and tell. Everyone bought their favorite stuffed animal, things like that. So they're really trying to connect, recognizing the importance of that relationship, continuing that. They were sharing some stories about kids saying, well, where are you, Carrie? And she's like, I'm in my kitchen. They're like, why are you in your kitchen? Processing the whole situation. But anyway, so yes, we are moving forward and working on it, and looking forward to sinking our teeth a little bit into Desi's new suggestions and recommendations too about what we'll be doing there.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful to hear that.
So that was the curriculum piece. The other part of the question was with respect to.
Well, I was just wondering, that we're paying the teachers, but they are doing things that's great.
They are, and some of the paras are joining the circles that they're leading also. So that's really a nice thing.
Wonderful.
Mary Ellen, could I just follow up just on my earlier question? So if we go out to the end of the year my simplistic thinking of it is that our total reserve fund transfer need will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 million. Is that a fair?
500,000?
No, $5 million.
Oh, 5 million.
Can you tell us, how did you figure that?
Well, if I'm
It's not
understanding.
just for BEEP, right, Michael?
No, it's not just for B, for everything.
Okay.
Oh,
So
Right.
this
Just to read.
is sort of covering up through from March 12th to April 6th. Guerrilla math out to the end of the year sounds like if it goes in a linear path would lead you to sort of a total, or maybe, I guess that's the question. Am I getting that wrong?
No. The piece that you may be sort of accelerating is, so I've taken what we've already budgeted, the revenue. So the operating budget, just at the top in terms of salaries, that includes like the additional days in June based above what we've already budgeted. So the salaries on the top you don't multiply that.
Oh, I see.
out.
So just
Okay.
be but the bottom pieces you would.
It's really the bottom pieces. So like BEEP, and I probably, let's see, for a month time, we don't collect $500,000 in revenue, but it's really $250 for BEEP and $250 for rental facilities. And that's probably for rental facilities, that's about half of what their annual rental receipts are. And for BEEP, the BEEP fund is a $2 million revolving fund. So the BEEP piece would expand 250 times April, May, June, 3. 250 times 3. So it would be like 2 million.
Okay. So the all in, if we go to the rest of the year, is very rough numbers, 3.2 to 3.5 million. So a total reserve fund transfer need.
Yeah, in that neighborhood, probably.
Okay.
I'll have more information as I finish the quarterly report. And I will include that as part of the quarterly report as an additional appendix of what that looks like.
Okay.
I think I've seen hands from Susan and maybe Helen.
no hand from me.
So I just wanted to note two things. First of all, in the MOU, professional development is not extra. And so professional development should be included in what teachers are doing. So I'm not sure that needs to be a separate line item. However, there's a lot of special education needs that I would expect we are going to have to invest in, especially for BEEP. I don't even know how we do it, but I mean, as I think about the early intervention, maybe our current staff can do it, Regina. I really just don't know what it even looks like and physically what it looks like and resource-wise what it looks like. But I just worry a lot about this, in particular, special education, English learners, and for BEEP in particular, early intervention and what kind of resources we might need there. So at any rate, I just want to be mindful of that.
Agreed. It's not easy.
Yeah, Helen, is there something we should be doing to contact people in the State House about what our needs are? I know everybody has them, but they feel pressure. Aren't they talking about giving some relief to some of this?
Yeah.
One of the things if I can, was thinking about is if we can't put some pressure on the State House to possibly provide funding for summer school or summer programs. I don't want to call it summer school, summer programs for at-risk kids, for all at-risk kids, not just the gateway cities, but for everybody, because every district has some at-risk kids. And to be able to make sure that they don't regress. What Susan was talking about is, or somebody was talking about earlier, not everybody being on the same page in the fall. If we can at least make sure that those children do not regress during the fall, we'll assume the summer was now, and then they have summer programs that can help them. So that was a thought I had. I don't know where other people think. Yeah, working together with STEPS and with Meg to see, also what they can round up. But I do think the state it would be a good investment for the state to do that.
And us, it would be a good investment for us to do it. So
Well, but first I'd like the state to
there
help
are kids.
us.
No. I'm all for getting the state to do it. I guess the one thread that I want to make sure goes through this entire conversation is not that we expect people to sort of spin straw into gold. I at least believe that we're going to have to invest in some of these areas in a way that we have not done historically to do what Jennifer was talking about, as what Casey was talking about. I just think that we shouldn't assume it's not going to happen. I think we need to have the discussion about what our goal is and then figure out what it would take and how far we can get, which is a different way to
that's part of that
the problem
that I was talking about, right?
Mary Ellen, what is it that you need, or Regina, what is it that you need from us tonight?
I think ideally we need to know from the school committee, and I know this is kind of out of your typical process, which is approval by the school committee to prorate rental and BEEP tuitions for the time that we are out of school and not providing the original service. And so mostly that would apply to our extended day programs. And I think I would probably talk to Matt a little bit about, BASE isn't included in that. And the reason being is that we base the assessment for BASE on their utilization. So the fact that we're not open and they don't have classes, they're going to have all the way from the March 10th or 12th all the way to May 4th as no usage, which is significant, huge and significant. So they'll start their FY22 budget with a significant reduction in their assessment because their FY22 program will be based on FY20 actual usage. So that's going to require a little bit more discussion, but the immediate need, and we can come back to that later, but the immediate need is really answers to our BEEP parents and our extended day and anybody else that we have that has a long-term lease or license for the year.
Can I ask a question? How much revenue would we lose a month from BEEP?
I can answer, Mary Ellen. I did ask our new bookkeeper to give me a number about how much monthly tuition we collect. And I had prepared a memo. Some of our families do pay annually, some pay biannually, and a vast majority of our families, 192 of them, pay 10 equal payments. So just those monthly payments, if I round it up, it's like 179. So I'm going to say 180, 180,000 per month. I'm the
Regina, isn't?
I keep assuming that we're coming back to school, you know?
So Regina, isn't you really, it's $1,000 a month per student, regardless of whether they paid annually or not. So how many students do you have?
Only. Some of them pay $2,000 a month.
Okay. So how many students do you have? 280?
We have total,
but some don't pay at all.
That's true.
Yeah. But it's not that many. So how many students do you have?
5%.
Yeah, 18.
Anybody who's on an IP.
I was thinking I'm sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay. So roughly 180, 190.
Let's say 200. Let's say 200.
I estimated 250. That's what I estimated was 250.
Yeah, 250 we have. 254, I think I just did the count.
Okay.
But I estimated $250,000 is the lost revenue for prorating March and April.
I actually, most places are not, from my understanding, from talking to other districts and even our extended day programs, Betsy had surveyed them. March is a loss. People are not offering refunds on March. You know, if we want to consider that, that would be the school committee's decision. But April, it's a different story at this point. I think I've kind of come full circle. I was initially receiving emails from families and I was responding to them individually. saying, well, we are paying our teachers. Tuition is still required. And as it's been extended, and hearing people's stories, it's been much more difficult to maintain that position. I do know Betsy Fitzpatrick did survey our extended day programs, and she heard from 5 of them. 4 of them, actually all 5, no one's giving money back for March, but people, Runkle, Heath, Coolidge Corner, and Lawrence are not charging for April. And Baker is kindly asking families if they can to contribute half so that they can stay afloat. That's what I know of now. In terms of other districts, I did reach out to the other pre-K inclusive programs in the EDCO Collaborative. Belmont or Bedford. I'm stumped because it was a BPS kind of email address, is giving April for free and talking about a reimbursement. The other districts are struggling, as we are, with the recommendation and recognizing that families are saying we're not paying if we're not coming. I have had 4 families ask to withdraw this week with the April 1st tuition looming. And I've asked people to please wait before they make that decision.
So the maximum liability we have is $750,000, correct? More or less.
I would say to
5.
A little less, 600, I was estimating.
Okay.
Mary Ellen, you're on mute. I couldn't hear what you said.
That's your range. Your range is 600 to 750.
Okay.
How do you get to 750, Mary Ellen? I see the 600. If we were to reimburse March, the 2 weeks from March as well.
So
we have April.
My estimate was 250 for my estimate was 250 between March and the April 6th. March and April, the month of April.
And that's
times 3, May and June, April, May and June. 250 times 3 is 750.
Yeah, and not counting the March, the 2 weeks in March.
Yes.
Yeah. That's sort of the way I'm thinking about it. And I would definitely, if we do decide to do this, ask for this from the reserve fund, a reserve fund transfer for this if we could. We can ask and they can say no, but I think it's a legitimate request.
So do you want to make the reserve fund transfer request first before waiving the tuition? And then we put the families on notice that we're gonna, what's the order of operations of how you want to do it?
Well, I think Regina's in a spot a little bit because families, the next tuition payment is due. And so unless we're able to ask for that reserve fund transfer very fast and find out very fast, I don't know that solves that immediate problem. Maybe we could do it for May and June, making a decision on May and June into the future, but we probably ought to make a decision on April.
We can make a decision and put the request in.
Sure.
We can do both of them.
Yeah,
that's true. Mary Ellen, what is it that you said? You said you had found out from Sewell what they were doing?
Today. That was today. Information today at 10 minutes after the decision was made.
And I'm sorry, I had heard.
So what they did, so what Sewell's doing is they are prorating March and forgiving April. And they're waiting on May when we all know what happens in May. And so for them, I think she said it's like a $75,000 hit for them. I don't know what their population is or how they're structured for funding. That seemed low.
Are there any other town entities that are in similar situations? Do we have any other programs like this?
That are town, under the town, no, just the recreation and us.
Okay.
Everybody else is independent.
I mean, one way to think about if our teachers are going to be working with students from now till the end of the year or whenever the schools reopen, you could kind of think of the March payment as the full March payment as payment for those services. And then in April, we would not charge. And then May, we'd have to decide. But I mean, I'm trying to think about how we would.
I'm sorry, Suzanne, could you repeat what you just said? What about one?
Yeah, one thought is that we don't give back money for March because our teachers are working with the students, and especially if they're doing it from now until the end of the year, that could be payment for that service.
Right.
But we wouldn't pay them, we wouldn't charge them for April.
And then we would leave it open about the rest of the year.
For the rest of the year.
And depending on whether school is in session or not. Does that make sense?
I'm fine with that. That makes sense to me.
Am I hearing a motion?
I'm going to move it. Let's move this along.
Helen, so can you articulate what your motion is, Helen?
Yes, my motion is to suspend tuition for BEEP families beginning April 1st. I assume that's when they pay, correct, Regina?
Yes, April 1st.
Okay. From April 1st until such time as BEEP opens up this year. So that way we don't have to come back and vote it again.
And Mr. Glover, are you seconding that motion?
Yes.
Okay. On that motion, Ms. Scotto?
Yes.
Mr. Perlman?
Yes.
Ms. Charlepsky?
Yes.
Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Dr. Abramowitz?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Oh, I couldn't hear her. Yes.
Ms. Wolf-Dickoff?
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Federspiel?
Yes.
Ms. Monopoly, you said yes? And I'm going to be abstaining from the vote. So I didn't hear, I couldn't tell, did Sharon vote or did we lose her?
I said yes.
You said yes. Okay. So by a vote of 8-0 with one abstention, that motion passes. And then with respect to the rental agreements, Mary Ellen, do you need a motion or information from us tonight on that? Or what if, yeah.
So it really, it impacts, so I guess my, since you've just done this motion for BEEP, it's the similar motion to forgive the extended day program lease payments for April until school reopens.
Mary Ellen, are there some of the programs, we haven't heard back from all of the programs about what it is that they're doing. If there were a program that was making the decision that they were going to continue to charge full tuition, would that impact your thoughts on how that would then work with the district and the rental? Or
can we give Mary Ellen the authority to renegotiate it on the assumption that if they are not charging the families, then the guidance to Mary Ellen would be, that we would, forgive it. And if they are still charging the families, whomever, because I don't want to make this about extended day. We have lots of other people who are renting our facilities, and we can't go through person by person. So I would like to give Mary Ellen, if it's okay with people, maybe we can phrase it as giving the deputy superintendent the authority to, based on her judgment of whether or not they are continuing to charge, their beneficiaries, their customers or constituents, the ability to is forgive the right word, or is it to refund, or is it to just not
suspend?
bill?
I think it's
suspend.
I think it's suspend lease payments or rental payments.
Mary Ellen, are you comfortable with that? Because it just seems to me that there are going to be a bunch of different people in different situations.
Yeah, between Matt and I, we will we can manage that.
Okay. So I move that we give the deputy superintendent the authority to suspend rental payments if it's deemed that they are not, collecting revenue for those months or any other reasonable.
Until such time that this, yes.
Yeah, until such time as they, until school reopens.
Regina, in your memo, before we move on to the next item on the agenda, in your memo, you had also mentioned.
Do we have to vote that? Julie, do we have to vote that?
Sorry, I am trying to move us along so fast, I just jumped right over. So, Susan, am I hearing that as a motion then? Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Perlman. All right.
Just for the record, and Ms. Coyne, could you please put in the minutes? I need to abstain because my wife's on the board of one of the extended days.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Scotto?
Yes.
Mr. Perlman?
Yes.
Ms. Charlepsky?
Yes.
Dr. Abramowitz?
Abstain.
Ms. Wolf-Dickoff? Ms. Federspiel? Ms. Monopoly?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes as well. So by a vote of 7-0 with 2 abstentions, that motion passes. And so and now, Regina, I had seen in your motion, you also had a discussion about a request for tuition for next year. Is that something, I'm not sure, Robin, if that's something that would need to be docketed? Should we mention it tonight, or would that go to finance first? Robin, you're muted. I can see you're talking, but I can't hear you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that. I think that may be on the upcoming finance subcommittee agenda.
Okay.
Wasn't it discussed already at finance? I remember having a discussion somewhere.
The chair is shaking her head.
We talked about talking about it, but we ran out of time.
Oh, okay. I knew there was something.
Okay, so we will add, there is
So upcoming.
on the upcoming finance.
When do you need to know by, Regina? Regina, when do you need to know by?
I'm trying to remember when it was done last year. March and April are the time we send out contracts for next year. People have put in their deposits to return, but we do generate those contracts. So we're right in the appropriate time frame. I did put it on the agenda there because we were talking about financial issues and thinking about how we'll enter next year. So I'm happy to wait for the finance subcommittee and go through the normal process as long as that, when is the next meeting?
Soon, right, Susan?
So that's scheduled for Wednesday, April 1st at 8:30 at this time.
That's fine. That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. So next, did we have anything, Ben or Mary Ellen, before we move on to the second quarter financial report? Is there anything else that we had under the update on the school closing related to COVID-19?
No, I think we've covered it.
Okay. All right. So then, Susan and Mary Ellen, we have an update on the second quarter financial report.
Yeah, let me just pull it. All right, I will attempt to share again.
Robin, while Mary Ellen's pulling that up, I just wanted to add to the record, like Michael did, the reason for my abstention on my vote was because I have a child who's at B. So I just wanted to reflect that it's not that I'm not supporting or not support it, but that is why I abstained from that.
I have the same situation.
So is this coming up? Has the memo come up for you, or is it still spinning?
It has not, Mary Ellen. It's black. We see that we're viewing, but it's a black screen.
Okay, let me try that again.
Could I make a suggestion, Madam Chair?
Yes.
How's that?
I'm not sure how long this will take, but we still have need for an executive session. And the time, it's 8:00.
I hear you. We do have need for an executive session. We are going to be talking about numbers a lot, so I think it would be helpful to have this. We have 10 minutes budget allocated to this discussion. Let's try to keep it to 10 minutes, and then we'll move into executive session. Or no, then we'll move briefly on to another item and then into executive session.
Okay, so as of the end of the second quarter, am I not muted? Okay. As of the end of the second quarter, we were projecting a deficit of 693,000. All of that is in salaries, and the other piece is that I just want to go through this briefly. We've had some good news in terms of circuit breaker. Circuit breaker increased, and we got our final report or final audit determination. Where our budget for circuit breaker, we started at 1.7 million and hit a $200,000 increase to 1.9 million. One of our struggles for this year is that our tuition materials fee, in researching the tuition and materials fee budget, which has historically had a $700,000 balance, was both the materials fee and then other general fund revenue. Some of them were one time, never to recur again. And we depleted the fund balance that was in that account when we balanced the FY18 budget that was in deficit. So we need to adjust that materials fee tuition budget to reflect really what we're going to collect. And that annually is about 505,000. I have 540,000 here because I'm anticipating that we will probably still have some one-time revenue that pops in here and not go to the general fund. So that has been a change, and that is a change that the committee needs to decide in terms of the FY21 budget, whether we adjust to what we now know about the materials fee tuition line, or whether we continue on the override plan, which is the same 700,000, and figure out the $200,000 as we get into FY 2021. We charge teachers there. Approximately 5 to 6 teachers are funded by this account, and we have not. Anyway, that's the update on that one to keep this short. Staffing is in the report as well. We have additional positions. Our substitute costs are significant. This is now will change dramatically as I finish the third quarter report because we are not going to be paying for subs for part of March and now all of April. So that should curb that line item and help our deficit significantly I'm not sure to the extent, but we'll likely report the substitute account as whatever has been actually charged to the account and just keep that. And if there's a balance in the account and look for any balance to pay for long-term subs. We're still, a third quarter report will also have our grants reconciliation and any unfunded positions we have there. One of the large changes in our operating budget this year and the pressure points has been special education transportation. We've had an increase in the number of vans and the number of monitors. We've had to split students. So even though our students, we only have 6 more students, we've had to add 3 vans and additional monitors. We've also had to add foster care and homeless. The state is saying that we're going to be reimbursed for. We're not quite sure what that's going to turn into. That flows to the general fund. One of the significant changes for FY20 that's a positive impact for 21 is that they are changing the circuit breaker to start to begin to reimburse for transportation. So some of our high costs or increased costs this year, we will be recouping and be able to offset partially offset or be prepared to offset our FY21 special ed transportation budget, which is significantly increasing as well. The English language translation budget, this is, I alluded to this earlier in talking about our EOC support that our translators are doing for us there, as well as the need for translation for curriculum materials as we move into a new delivery. And there's some pressure, a lot of pressure there. We are fast approaching spending anywhere from, even though Mindy gave me $60,000 to $75,000 a year, I think last year we ended at well over 80,000. So this is an ongoing pressure point that we need to be mindful of and be funding. Mindy does a great job with what needs to be translated, why, what the languages are. We use a number of state contracts for translators, as well as our any of our employees who also have the ability to do translations. With that, I'm going to end there because the whole budget for the third quarter is dramatically different than it was when I wrote this report. Times are different, pressures are different, cost allocations are going to be different. So I'll end it here and answer any questions. Are there any questions?
All right. Seeing none, is there any guidance that you need from us right now, Mary Ellen, or we're ready to move on to the next?
Nope, we're ready to move on.
Okay. David, thank you for taking the time. Next, we have a discussion and possible vote on a letter to state officials regarding spring 2020 standardized testing for the benefit of those who are not able, did not receive your statement. Could you go ahead and read that statement perhaps, and then we can discuss?
Sure, let me just pull that out.
We're also, just as a reminder, we're trying to keep this to 10 minutes as well, just because we're running about 2 hours behind.
Dear Brookline Legislative Delegation, the Brookline School Committee urges you to pass legislation waiving the Massachusetts Comprehensive Assessment System, MCAS requirements, and all other state or federally mandated educational testing requirements for the 2019-20 academic year. The Brookline School Committee further asks that the absence of such assessments in the 2019-20 academic year not be used adversely against any district in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The outbreak of the international COVID-19 pandemic necessitates local flexibility on compliance with state and federal student testing. In the interest of the public health, Governor Charlie Baker ordered all schools closed as of March 17th for a period of multiple weeks, likely to be further extended. School closures disrupt the lives and educational progress of our students, impacting their ability to meet grade level standards in their studies, including in the subjects for which the Commonwealth of Massachusetts annually administers statewide academic assessments. Even if some districts resume the school year prior to June 30, other districts might not resume. In either scenario, there would be no way to adequately compensate for the missed classroom instructional time on material that would appear on the MCAS examinations and any other mandated academic assessments. It would be inequitable to hold students in a pandemic-shortened school year to the same degree of standardized testing rigor and expectations as those in typical years. It is imperative that during this time of health-induced mass closures, school districts continue to focus their efforts toward local school and community needs without the pressure of standardized assessments. In the words of U.S. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos, neither students nor teachers need to be focused on high-stakes tests during this difficult time. On March 17th, the U.S. Department of Education announced that students impacted by school closures will not have to take state standardized tests for the 2019-20 school year, provided that their state submits a proper federal waiver request citing the COVID-19 pandemic. The Brookline School Committee therefore asks that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts apply for this federal waiver and that the state waive any and all mandated academic assessments for the 2019-2020 school year. Thank you for your consideration. Best regards, Brookline School Committee.
Thank you, David, for taking the time to write that ahead. Does anyone have any comments or edits that they'd like to make before we vote on this? Yes, Helen?
So I think this is a great letter. I like the fact that you quote Betsy DeVos. DeVos. But the only edit I would make is, in addition to our legislative delegation, I would send it to the chairs of the House Subcommittee on Education and the Senate, to Alice Peisch, and right now I'm blocking on the Senate leader in education.
Nathan Lewis.
Thank you. So I would also include them on this letter. Other than that, I think it's great. Well, you could say, yeah, and the dear, adjust the dear, whoever it is.
Okay. Any other?
I'll move it.
Thank you. And then, David, did you want to second it? You made the motion.
I'll second.
Unless you want to move it, Dave. Happy to second.
Second's fine.
All right. Ms. Scotto?
Yes.
Mr. Proman?
Yes.
Ms. Charlevsky?
Yes.
Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Dr. Abramowitz?
Yes.
Ms. Wolfdikoff? Ms. Federspiel?
Yes.
Ms. Monopoly?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye. So that's a unanimous vote. Thank you, David, for getting that. Is it drafted from you, or is that something someone else needs to sign?
So I put it as all of us having signed it.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So now do we have any new business?
Can I suggest that Robin put it on our letterhead and send it? It shouldn't come from an individual email. It should come from our letterhead.
Okay. Thank you. New business? All right. Seeing none. I'm just laughing because I printed the agenda and it has cut off at the end of the language. So, Robin, you might need to help me with where it cuts off. We have a motion to meet in executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, for the following purposes. For purpose 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, non-aligned personnel. For purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with Brookline Educators Union, EEU, Unit A, Unit B, and paraprofessionals. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares. So we'll take a roll call vote on that as well.
I'm sorry, Julie, there was just one more purpose, purpose 7.
Oh, thank you.
To review and approve executive session minutes from March 16th and March 19th.
Thank you, Robin. All right, and we're not coming back into open session, correct, Robin?
You may come back into it.
We may. Okay, thank you. So was there additional language with respect to that other purpose? Which is what we would come back, or is that covered under the ones that I read out loud?
It AFSME.
AFSME.
It's above. It's there.
There's a possible vote after the executive session on a proposed agreement with AFSME.
I know, but for one of the reasons, for one of the purposes, is that one of the purposes?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said that. So that would be under strategy with respect to collective bargaining. So it was with the BEU units and then also with AFSME.
Okay, sorry, I must have printed a less updated agenda. So Brookline Educators Union, Unit A, Unit B, paraprofessionals, and AFSCME as well.
Is this, sorry, are we doing non-aligned?
Yes, that was the first purpose. Thank you.
And also, are we going to have an issue coming back into open session if Brookline Interactive Group drops off?
So I think that the guidance, Robin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the guidance that we've received is that we can come back into open session, that Robin has a way that she is able to record, and then that can be posted online immediately or at some near point thereafter, and that meets our requirements as well.
It does. It would meet the requirements, but Big is interested in broadcasting that final vote, so they intend to go to a black screen, and then I'll let them know when you're going back into open session, and at that point they will re-enter the meeting.
Although they would still be a participant and recording, or they would be dropping off the call and we would be locking the call like we did?
We would lock the call.
Okay. And then are they aware that our executive session is scheduled to go 2 hours, and that
They are aware of that.
Okay. All right. So I will do roll call. Ms. Scotto or Robin, do you have to do the roll call, or is it okay if I do?
You can do it. That's fine. Either way.
Okay. Ms. Scotto?
Yes.
Mr. Perlman?
Yes.
Ms. Charlevsky?
Yes.
Mr. Glover?
Yes.
Dr. Abramowitz?
Yep.
Ms. Wolf-Dickoff?
You're muted.
Ms. Federspiel?
Yes.
Ms. Monopoly?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes as well. So we will be moving into executive session, and we will likely come back into open session. Or just who has the language on what the vote is with respect to AFSCME?
I'm sorry, but he hasn't let me know that we're live yet.
Oh, okay. Robin, do you have the language on the AFSCME motion, or do I have the language on the AFSCME motion?
It's in the last docket. Okay, you're live now. So
Okay, let me just pull up that last docket.
Yep. So it's the possible vote to approve agreements between the PSB and AFSCME AFL-CIO Council 93, Local 1358.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Do we have someone make the motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Helen. Someone second?
Oh, second.
Barbara? All right, we're going to do roll call vote. Ms. Monopoly?
Yes.
Mr. Perlman?
Yes.
Ms. Wolf-Dickoff?
Yes.
Ms. Scotto?
Yes.
Ms. Charlevsky?
Yes.
Dr. Abramowitz?
Yep.
Ms. Federspiel?
Yes.
Mr. Glover?
Yes.
The chair?
Michael, I'm sorry, Michael, you said yes?
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay, sorry, I didn't hear that. And the chair is abstaining. All right, and then Robin, do we have a separate vote on the next one, or we voted them together?
It says only one vote on there, but I think one was for the food service workers and one was for the...
Asa, the secretary.
Yeah.
But did we just list one, or I'm sorry, did Robin's motion read both?
I think I said agreements.
Agreements.
But if you want to take them separate.
It's with an S. Okay.
Okay. Mary Ellen, is that sufficient for you?
Yep. We'll get a signature at some point.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. So we're going to be having a finance meeting that's going to include an executive session. We will find out tomorrow or in the very near future if it will also include a public session. We will also be having an
It will.
It will.
Have to.
Okay. So it will
Both the public session and yeah.
Okay. And then we will also be scheduling an upcoming curriculum subcommittee meeting, and we will find out the date for hopefully tomorrow. So thank you for everyone.
And that last one is going to have public comment, and so it should probably be at a time when the public can attend, like Tuesday evening or Wednesday evening or something, because we can't do it Monday.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. That's good feedback. All right. So thank you to everyone. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.